Welcome to the October 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Natural Resources Board here in Madison. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the City of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll now call our hybrid meeting of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board to order. We'll have people both in person and appearing virtually online today as part of the meeting. In fact, a couple of our board members will be virtual this morning, and a number of our presenters. I've got a few reminders and introductory comments before we go to the agenda. Please turn off phones and other devices that may interrupt the meeting, and please keep the background noise down. Participants online, please make sure you're muted and your videos turned off until your item is announced. And note, there's sometimes a delay in the Zoom broadcast, and it's easy to talk over one another. I will try not to do that today. Natural Resource Board meetings are televised via YouTube, and we welcome and thank all viewers for tuning in. Records of our past meetings are available for review on the DNR website under the Natural Resources Board Briefs of Action. Direct public involvement and open, transparent meetings are the foundation for how this board has operated for over 50 years and for how we will strive to operate today. Our Natural Resources Board discussions and decision-making are transparent to all, and public testimony is welcome at every regular scheduled Natural Resource Board meeting. To ensure fair and equal treatment for everyone, we limit speakers to 3 minutes, and we've got our light system to help remind you. So when the lights turn from green to yellow, they'll be soon turning red, and at that point, if you haven't already, please bring your comments to a close. I also would like to mention that many of our speakers find it difficult to stay within the 3 minutes. They've got a lot of important information they'd like to share with the board, and we accept remarks with written material. So a lot of the technical stuff, if you can't fit it into your 3 minutes, please feel free to provide written supplements to your testimony, and that might help all of us to focus on your remarks and have that additional information available. I'd like to express thanks to the board, to Secretary Karen Yun and your leadership team for your support of the board and your commitment to enhance collaboration between the department, the board, and the citizens that we all serve. Specific thanks to our issue presenters, DNR Information Technology, Office of Communications, General Counsel, and all of the support staff who make these meetings possible. Your time is valuable, and we very much appreciate your support. I also like to individually recognize Ashley Bistel, our Natural Resource Board liaison. Ashley provides administrative support to the board, is very good at it, and she's also the primary contact for public communications with the board. So I like to identify her, and those of you that maybe can see her, you can identify a name and a face with the person that you're talking with on the phone. And lastly, I thank all the employees, citizen volunteers, and conservation partners of the Department of Natural Resources for your commitment and tireless work to protect and enhance our natural resources and to serve all citizens of our great state. Board members, any questions or comments? Hearing none, Ashley, please call the roll.
Doug Cox.
Here.
Deb Dassow.
Present.
Jeff Hastings.
Present.
Patty Schachner.
Present.
Robin Schmidt.
Present.
Bill Smith.
Present.
And Rachel Baresa is absent and excused.
With that, we'll move on to the agenda. We recognize that we have a quorum today, so we'll be able to conduct business. Next on the agenda is the Secretary's remarks. Karen, any comments?
Sure. Thanks, Bill.
Great.
Well, first, I'll just start by saying we continue to monitor the shutdown of the federal government. We're really working to manage through difficult times for our federal partners and staff. But we are keeping very close tabs on it and making sure that the impacts are minimized here in the department, and we'll continue to do so. It's been a busy month for me. Top highlights were going down to Milwaukee for this ribbon cutting of a South Shore beach rehabilitation project, which has been ongoing for decades. A great partnership between the community, UW Milwaukee, the EPA, and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to restore this beach just right downtown in the South Shore to make sure that there's clean water quality for the beach down there. Really beautiful place. Encourage you to take a look if you get a chance. I also headed up to Mole Lake to meet with Chairman Van Zyl with some of my team. We got to see some of the work we do in partnership with the fish hatchery there. Got to see them taking walleye out of their ponds and putting them into trucks to stock lakes up there. It was really cool. Great partnership. We had a good discussion, and the chairman also took me to Rice Lake, which is within the reservation boundaries, and got to see my first wild rice habitat. It was really amazing. And discussed like the cultural significance of it to the tribe. So a really incredible experience. Earlier this month, I got to go to the WATFA, the Wisconsin ATV UTV Association. They have an annual VIP ride with trail ambassadors, legislators, state trail council members, local officials to really celebrate the work that they do in keeping people safe on ATVs and UTVs on the trails. Wearing helmets, driving sober, putting on your seatbelt, all of those types of things, and the work they do across the region to make sure that we're doing that safely. And probably the biggest thing I did in the last month is I had my first annual tribal consultation, which is something all agencies do during this administration. So met with all of the 11 federally recognized tribes, really had a good discussion about some of their priorities and concerns and want to work through those challenges going forward. Just really appreciate the importance of our government-to-government relationship with the tribes and look forward to working with them going forward. And then yesterday I got back from Milwaukee. I went to the Midwest Climate Resilience Conference, which was held at the Baird Center. I participated in a panel really talking about the DNR's work with that room of climate adaptation practitioners about what we can do together to adapt to climate change. So, and much more on the plate, but I'll stop there. Back to you, Bill.
Thanks, Karen. You got a busy schedule, and thanks for sharing a few of the high points with us. Let's move on to approval of the agenda for the October 22nd meeting today. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda for October?
I'll make that motion, Chair.
Doug moves approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Robin seconds. Any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We have an agenda. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Item 2A, approval of the brief of action from September 24, 2025. Item 2B, acknowledgement of a donation. The Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin has donated $15,000 to the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation. This donation will be used for restoration and management at Mott's Ravine State Natural Area. Item 2C, acknowledgement of a donation. The Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin will donate $59,558.22 to the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation. This donation will be used for monitoring and conservation of bat populations by the Wisconsin Bat Program within the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation. Item 2D, request the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for Board Order WA 9-25 for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 660 through 679 related to technical corrections, clarifications, and minor modifications to hazardous waste regulations, and repeal of superseded NR 187, Household Hazardous Waste Grant Program regulations. Item 2E, request the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for Board Order WM 11-25 for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 10 related to turkey management. And item 2F, request the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for Board Order WM-13-25E and WM-14-25 for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 10 related to establishing the 2026 through 2030 migratory bird season framework and regulations. I should mention also that the board had received written input for items 2E, F, and 4C from the Wisconsin Animal Protection Society. Any questions from the board? Could we have a motion to approve, please?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Robin moves approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jeff seconds. Any comments from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Move on to item 3. We have no items listed under 3. We'll move on to 4, action items. Item 4A, request the board adopt a board order WA-8-24, proposed rules affecting chapters NR 500 and 520 to provide an alternative method for a municipality to establish proof of financial responsibility required for a solid waste disposal facility. Michael Schmidt, Business Support and IT Section Manager. Welcome, Michael.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chair Smith, Secretary Hun, members of the board. As Chair Smith mentioned, my name is Michael Schmidt. I'm the Business Support and IT Section Manager with the Waste and Materials Management Program. One of the many duties that I have under my purview is owner financial responsibility for solid waste and hazardous waste facilities in the state of Wisconsin. Here before you today, seeking approval of our final board order here, WA-08-24, approving an alternative method for municipalities for owner financial responsibility. This would provide, we'll get into that in a minute. You can see on the slides here, we're kind of at our final stage, adopting the final draft rule as written. If approved today, it'll go off to the governor's office for final review, and we'll go from there. As previously mentioned, been here before under an emergency rule. Act 107 was passed in March of 2024. It established requirements relating to this alternative method for establishing owner financial responsibility at municipally owned solid waste disposal facilities. And you'll have to forgive me, occasionally I slip into vernacular on occasion. So if I rattle off OFR on you, it's owner financial responsibility. This test specifically would allow a financial test similar to that of a private net worth test for municipally owned facilities. We were directed to promulgate rules. The emergency rule needed to be done by November 1st of 2024, and this permanent rule needs to be completed by November of 2027. We figured as long as we had the, pedal to the metal here, we'll just keep things rolling and get it done before the due date. Just a little bit of background, as I mentioned before, with types of owner financial responsibility. This alternative method is specifically allowing municipally owned solid waste sites to utilize a financial test, again, very similar to that of a private entity's net worth test. Seeing as municipally owned sites are publicly owned, they can't have a net worth, so this is just a test that allows us to check whether or not they have the finances available to maintain closure and long-term care of their own sites. All facilities are allowed to use what we consider a standard mechanism for OFR. Those can be broken into 2 categories: interest-bearing, which is like cash that goes into an account that earns interest over time. Those would include escrows, trusts, and deposits with the state, or non-interest-bearing accounts or mechanisms such as an irrevocable letter of trust, a bond, or an insurance. All facilities are also allowed to supply some other mechanism to us as long as it meets certain criteria, and those are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So when we were establishing this permanent rule for the municipal financial test, we made 2 slight edits to the emergency rule, both of which were made based on public comment we specifically received. We adjusted the submittal deadline from 90 days to 210 days. We heard from numerous externals that 90 days just is not a feasible timeline to turn around a financial audit of a municipality. So we decided to adhere to federal code in this situation, just like Act 107 required us to, and that's where the 210 days came from. The second minor adjustment that we got from the public was changing the requirement of a certified public accountant's opinion to a report from a certified public accountant stating that the municipality has met the requirements as described either in statute or in this emergency rule or permanent rule when it is published. We made minor further edits to the rule just to clarify what is actually required in the submittal. So more administrative things, better itemizing the rule so it had a better flow, just saying these are what is going to be required during the submittal and how we will conduct our reviews and what would happen if we find a positive determination versus an adverse determination, but very minor edits. Other than that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Okay, we have no public speakers for this item. Any questions from the board? Robin?
So, yeah, thanks for all your hard work. First of all, I want to congratulate you, 2 years ahead of schedule. Good job. I'm sure that for those municipalities that this is helping, they really appreciate that. And so thank you for that. Could you just give a brief summary of like how many municipalities you think will take advantage of this? And do you have any idea of what kind of cost savings they might see from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we had, I believe we're up to 7 municipalities that submitted under the emergency rules, and we anticipate that they're going to continue to do so under the permanent rules. We just passed the deadlines for resubmittals, so we're working on with all 7 of those municipalities to continue doing that. And it's been a smattering of municipalities. It isn't just like, oh, Dane County or whatever. It's some smaller ones as well that have submitted under this new emergency rule. We would anticipate, I think originally we guessed around 10 or 11 total would take advantage of this, just based on conversations with a few municipalities. I would assume we'll have a few more trickling in as time goes on here. As far as cost savings go, it really depends on the choice of mechanism that a municipality chose to pass the existing requirements for owner financial responsibility. If they took cash and put it into, say, like a deposit account that's earning interest, we authorize the release of that upon approval of successfully passing the financial test. So essentially, they will get those funds back. What we've come to realize is a lot of municipalities are just using that freedom to reinvest that cash balance into other accounts to gain higher interest rates that are prohibitive currently under our statute and rules. And then they use that then to conduct their long-term care over time. So our estimates right now are really just based on the fees that a municipality would have to pay no matter what mechanism they have to use, because a third party is providing a lot of those. And that seems to range between 1% and 3%. It's a little anecdotal from our perspective because we're not involved in that process when they are paying those fees out. It's just based on what we've heard from externals saying, yeah, we pay about 1% on whatever we have invested. So it's a little more nuanced than that, but we would expect 1% to 3% of whatever their mechanism is would be savings annually for them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none, I guess a motion's in order. Somebody'd like to offer one.
I move that we adopt Board Order WA 0824.
Deb moves adoption. Do we have a second?
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, I think I heard Patty say second, so we've got a second from Patty. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 4B. Request the board adopt board order AM-10-23, proposed rule affecting chapter NR 410 relating to revisions to fees for reviewing air pollution control construction permit applications and exemption determination requests and affecting small businesses. Ronald Binsley, Permits and Stationary Source Modeling Section Manager. Welcome, Ronald.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Secretary Yun, members of the board. I'm Ron Binsley, the Permits and Stationary Source Modeling Section Manager for the Air Management Program. And yes, I think that's the longest title in the program. I'm before you today to request adoption of the final draft rule for Board Order AM 1023, which revises new source review construction permit program fees in Chapter NR 410. The primary goal of this rulemaking is to revise construction permit fees to generate funding sufficient to administer a permit program that meets statutory requirements, is protective of air quality, and addresses needs of the regulated community. A construction permit allows a facility to construct, reconstruct, modify, or relocate sources of air pollution. The air construction permitting program is a pre-construction program, and therefore, in most cases, when a construction permit is required, a company cannot commence work on a project until a permit has been issued. Given the pre-construction character of these permits, their timely issuance is critical to the economic development of our state, giving companies the ability to react to business opportunities and market changes. In addition to economic development, a well-functioning construction permit program is vital to the protection of Wisconsin's air resources. The department and the public depend on these permits to assure that new projects are compliant with all applicable air pollution regulations, including the air pollution control requirements for new major sources. Despite department efforts to downsize the program, cut expenses, and implement efficiencies, the revenues generated by the existing fees are insufficient to support the staffing needs to meet the statutorily required permit review timelines or the business needs of our stakeholders. This remains the case even after the department transferred 10 FTE for construction permitting work from the construction permit program revenue account to another funding source. A number of factors have contributed to the inadequacy of these fees. Including 2 permit streamlining efforts promulgated in the past decade at the behest of stakeholders, which have created additional permit exemptions and flexibilities requiring review by permit writers for which inadequate fees are collected. So I want to share with you a little background on on the changes that we've done with this rule. I should be advancing slides, so I apologize for that. In this rulemaking, the department is proposing to make a number of changes to the existing fee structure to ensure adequate long-term funding for construction permitting. The more substantial changes include increasing most construction permit fees by 20% to reflect inflation and other increases in program costs since 2011, when fees were last revised, adjusting select fees to reflect more closely the effort associated with specific permitting activities, adding fees for several activities for which no fees are currently collected, such as fees to incorporate into a permit the terms of a consent decree, and adding an automatic adjustment factor to help revenues keep pace with increased program costs over time. The revenue generated by this rule will stabilize construction permit program funding, allow the department to better address the program's low staffing levels, and enable the department to better meet customer expectations and respond to time-sensitive economic development proposals. The air management program provided stakeholder outreach throughout the rulemaking process, as shown on this slide. In fall 2023, the department developed an NR 410 rulemaking webpage to assist the public in understanding the purpose of this rule, the rulemaking process, and the rule's progress. In November 2023, 2 information sessions were held, one for all permit holders and another for the Air Management Advisory Group. In December 2023, the department gave a presentation to Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce on the proposed rule. Also in December, a technical advisory group convened and held meetings in December and January with subsequent follow-up communications. In spring 2024, the department solicited comments on the economic impact analysis of the rule. 2 comments were received, one from the Wisconsin Utility Association and a second from Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce and Wisconsin Paper Council commenting jointly. The AIR program had meetings with these stakeholders to discuss streamlining efforts and potential rule changes. In summer 2024, the department solicited public comment on the proposed rule and held a public hearing. During the comment period, the department received comments from the Wisconsin Cast Metals Association, as well as those who had previously commented during the economic impact assessment phase. In September 2025, the department updated the Air Management Advisory Group on changes in the final draft rule. So based on the feedback that we received, the department has made a number of changes, substantial changes to the rule as originally drafted. These changes include, under the provisions of Act 19, shifting 10 FTE supporting permits from the Program Review Construction Permit account to the Environmental Management account of the Segregated Environmental Fund to allow reductions in the proposed fees. The reduced fees result in more than a 75% decrease in the 2-year economic impact of the rule as compared with the draft rule proposed last June. Should this rule be finalized, the revenue increase in fiscal year 27 due to the revised fees is anticipated to be approximately $300,000, the amount needed to support roughly 2 FTE. Changes also include basing future automatic adjustment of fees on general wage adjustments rather than inflation, and making the adjustment every 4 years rather than annually. Finally, changes also include adding 2 department reporting requirements related to the construction permit program: an annual financial report on the state of the permit program account, and a one-time report describing the permit streamlining measures the department has completed or intends to undertake supported by the fees assessed under this rule. In response to stakeholder requests made during the rulemaking, the department intends to convene a permit streamlining work group that will consider current opportunities for permitting improvements as well as suggestions provided by stakeholders. Any efficiencies that can be realized through additional streamlining will help to strengthen the financial stability of the permit program. I would be happy to answer any questions from the board on this proposal.
Thank you, Ron. We have no public speakers for this item, but I do want to mention the board received written communication from Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. Are there any questions from the board? Doug?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ron. So the comment you made about the comments and the changes that resulted, so the shift of FTE is how many, 16?
How many FTE were
Yeah.
shifted? 10.
10. So they were shifted to environmental management. Is that correct?
The Environmental Management Fund.
Are they still able to work back toward air permitting reviews and air permitting?
That is what they are working on, yes.
That's what they're working on.
Yeah.
So how does that save? How does that result in the decrease?
So under Chapter 20, this program revenue account was authorized 19.5 FTE previously, right? And now, instead of being 19.5, Chapter 20 would authorize this account 9.5 FTE. 10 of the FTE that fees previously supported are now supported through segregated funds. So the fees do not have to support the entire effort of the program as historically has been the case.
Is that streamlining enough to maintain that the air division is able to keep up with the kind of work that's gonna come with permitting?
Well, I think our first task is hiring. Our staffing levels are really low. And in order to keep the construction permit program at a reasonable level of effort right now so that review timelines are reasonable for the stakeholders, we've shifted like all permit, right? We have two distinct permitting programs, right? We have the operation permit program. The one for major sources is Title V. All the staff who were assigned to working on those permits have been shifted over to construction permit work. And their work is being supported by this 10 FTE in part, you know, that was provided in the budget. Long term, yeah, streamlining will be an important part of what we're trying to do here. We have done a tremendous amount of streamlining in this program in the last 10 years, and we're hoping to do much more. So I think we're on a good path, especially with if we have this rule adopted and approved, to have a stable program.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Robin?
So this is, the financial end of this is really complicated. And I think I can't begin to even say that I understand, anything but the basics. I feel like it's a little bit like that game where you put the ball in the 3 cups and you just move things around like this, and then you try to figure out where the ball went. But can you just confirm, so by shifting 10 FTE from the construction permit account to environmental management account of the segregated environmental fund, how stable is that fund, and is there adequate, does this have a negative impact to anything else that fund has been used for?
That is a question that I cannot speak to, but from my understanding, I think that fund is, I think it is stable. That's my understanding. And I don't think this will be given the size of the fund and the size of this program, I don't think this would be a significant burden on that fund.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Patty, don't want to forget about you. Sometimes I talk over people out on the virtual line.
Nope, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. I have one question, Ron. The 10 FTE that you switched to different funding that will continue to work on construction permits, what did that funding previously pay for, and what are you sacrificing to put that money toward construction permit review rather than fees?
That I cannot speak to because that account is not something that is in something the air management program manages. So I don't want to, if someone else wants to speak to what that environmental fund, its composition and what it does, I can't really speak to that. So I'm sorry, Chairman.
Okay, Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ron. Stephen Little, Deputy Secretary. I'm asking Maggie Hutter to make sure she's following this part of the board meeting, and we'll get your questions answered.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions from the board? Hearing none, we're probably due for a motion.
Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt board order AM 10-23.
Doug moves approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Deb. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Move on to item 4C. Scope statement. Request the board approve the statement of scope for board order NH-4-25 and conditionally approve the public hearing notice and notice of submittal of proposed rules to the Legislative Council Rules Clearinghouse for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 12, 16, 19, 21, 22, 27, 40, and 45, all related to amphibian and reptile regulations. Scott Carroll, Wildlife Regulation Policy Specialist. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Secretary Young, members of the board. Here today to ask for approval for scope statement NH 04-25. Now, you may be wondering, what is the wildlife guy doing up here talking about amphibians and reptiles? So herptiles, like amphibians and reptiles, fall under the umbrella of the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation. And they don't work on rules as often as we in wildlife do. So when they do, I assist them as a rule writer to help them get through this process. So we do have experts here if needed to talk about, we have a herp expert here, but I'm here to talk about the rule process and the scope statement and what we'll be doing. So this is the scope approval part of the process. We were required to hold a preliminary public hearing on the scope by the Joint Committee for Review of Administrative Rules. That hearing was authorized by the board at the September NRB meeting, and we held that hearing on October 2nd. 8 members of the public did attend the hearing, and the comments we received during the hearing and the open public comment period are summarized in the memo that's attached to this green sheet for the board. So, herptiles cover snakes, lizards, frogs, salamanders, and turtles. And Wisconsin regulates the harvest, live take, possession, propagation, sale, trade, exhibition, rehabilitation, stocking, and release of these species. The department has heard over the years that our rules need updating to provide better clarification to the public, law enforcement, and department staff regarding allowable activities, improve enforceability, and implement current management goals. So in the Midwest, Wisconsin has relatively lax herp regulations compared to neighboring states, and this could lead to the exploitation of herptiles in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is home to several rare herp species, which makes sufficient regulation very critical to populations. So in the photos, you will see on the top a mink frog, a species of special concern found in northern Wisconsin, then a blue spotted salamander, a common species that is sold in the pet trade industry. And finally, the last one is a timber rattlesnake, a species of special concern that can be the target of poachers. So with approval of the scope statement, we will begin drafting the rule, and we anticipate having a rule for the board's review back in the winter of 2026. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we have no public speakers for this item. And as I mentioned earlier, we did have one written communication from the Wisconsin Society for Protection of Animals. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, are we ready for a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Patty. We have a motion to approve from Patty. Do we have a second?
Second.
Doug seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Scope's approved. Thank you, Scott.
You.
We'll move on to item 4D, other approvals. Land donation, Lower Wisconsin State Riverway, Grant County. Terry Bay, Director, Bureau of Facilities and Lands. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Good morning, members of the board, Secretary Young. The department is requesting approval to accept a donation of 195.88 acres of land located entirely within the project boundary of the Lower Wisconsin State Riverway from the Mississippi Valley Conservancy Incorporated. The subject property was acquired by the Conservancy in September of 24 for $147,500, which was partially funded with grant funds from the Warren Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. The subject property abuts department-owned land to the west and to the south and has approximately 0.6 miles of frontage on the main channel of the Wisconsin River, which also serves as the northern boundary of the property. The property is comprised of bottomland hardwoods abutting 286 acres of DNR-owned land. That land is known as the Woodman, Sand Prairie, and Dead Lake State Natural Areas. It features a dry sand prairie and some sand barrens with several dunes and Dead Lake. And Dead Lake is a 17-acre shallow lake that is considered a deep marsh. The lake has excellent habitat for muskrats, beaver, mink, and puddle ducks. The sand prairie and barrens are dominated by marshland vegetation. The property will be accessible to the public through the adjacent DNR-owned lands and, of course, the riverway. The adjoining property requires about 5,500 feet of property line signage currently across the wetlands and the marsh, and is difficult to maintain. The addition of this donation will reduce that signage to approximately 3,000 feet. So we gain some efficiencies here. Additionally, the lands are separated and will be made contiguous and will be more effectively to prescribe burn. The Lower Wisconsin State Riverway project area was formed by combining 9 existing wildlife areas along the Wisconsin River from Prairie du Chien to Sauk City, as well as some additional lands to close separations between the wildlife area boundaries. The acquisition of this parcel would continue to protect the scenic nature, natural values of the track, and provide opportunities for public recreation and natural resource management of the land. The subject property complements the habitat of the Lower Wisconsin State Riverway, and the parcel will be open for all 5 nature-based outdoor activities, including hunting, fishing, trapping, hiking, and cross-country skiing. With that, the department is requesting that the board approve the acceptance of this very generous donation of 195.88 acres of land for the Lower Wisconsin State Riverway from the Mississippi Valley Conservancy Incorporated. That a certificate of appreciation be sent to the donor, and that an expression of appreciation be made part of the official records from the Natural Resources Board.
Thank you, Terry. We have one public speaker for this item, and with the board's acceptance, we'll hold off on questions and comments and hear from the speaker. Abby Church, Mississippi Valley Conservancy Conservation Director. Good morning, Abby. I see you on the screen. Can you hear us?
Yes, good morning, and thank you to all of you for all you do for the natural resources of this great state. The Woodman floodplain property is an exceptional example of collaboration. When Mississippi Valley Conservancy prioritizes a project, we have a scoring sheet, and it gets extra points if it falls within a partner's priority area. And this property absolutely nailed it in terms of meeting the priorities of multiple organizations, not only including the Lower Wisconsin Riverway, but also Wisconsin Wetlands Association, National Wild Turkey Federation, the Wisconsin Wildlife Action Plan, Lower Wisconsin Bluffs and Floodplain Conservation Opportunity Area, which is designated as of continental significance. This property also meets the priorities of the Lower Wisconsin Important Bird Area. It's designated as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention, and also meets the goals identified by the local municipalities in the Grant County Comprehensive Plan, the Town of Woodman Comprehensive Plan, and the Grant County Land and Water Resource Management Plan, all 3 of which prioritize the protection of wetlands and floodplains. This site is one that the citizens of Wisconsin can be proud of. It's one of the only known populations in the state of unaltered southern wild rice marsh. We've got a lot of protected northern wild rice marshes, but not a lot of southern wild rice, which is incredibly important for waterfowl and other wildlife. The science behind land conservation overwhelmingly demonstrates the importance of contiguous corridors of habitat to prevent species declines. And this opportunity for the state of Wisconsin to take ownership not only prevents fragmentation of habitat, but also fragmentation of ownership and fragmentation of management, and provides an efficiency of scale in allowing that contiguous corridor of habitat to be managed as one large unit. This incredible project exemplifies the spirit, the intent, and the value of the Wisconsin Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Program, and it would not have been possible without that funding source. So I hope all of you have a chance to paddle the Wisconsin River and check this property out. Thank you.
Abby, thank you for your comments and your support. Any questions from the board for Abby? Okay, thank you very much for appearing. Do we have, I also want to mention, we received a written input from Mark Cupp, Executive Director of the Lower Wisconsin State Riverway Board, supporting approval. Are there questions from the board for Terry? Robin?
So this is an amazing opportunity, and really much gratitude for the Mississippi Valley Conservancy for the work that they did to secure the funding for obtaining this property. Terry, when we chatted, you talked a little bit about how organizations like the Mississippi Valley Conservancy are more nimble when these types of properties come up for transaction sales, things like that. Can you just elaborate on that as to kind of like how that works for them, and the transfer to us kind of completes that whole process?
Yeah, as we talked about, Robin, there are opportunities that come up where the department can't respond as fast as a private entity like the Conservancy. So those partners may look at the property and say, we're going to acquire this property because we can do it quicker. We don't have to go seek funding approval, or may not even go through some of the other processes the department goes through. So they can respond a lot quicker to a potential land sale and acquire that land. They can then apply for a grant, which is completely unguaranteed. There's a risk for applying for that grant if it would meet all the grant requirements. And then if they hold the property for a period of time, they can then make a request to transfer that property or donate that property to the state. None of those are guaranteed. There's a lot of hurdles and a lot of long road to go here, because all of the efforts have to align. There has to be common goals here, and there has to be, of course, a lot of public benefit to any donation that the department receives.
But if I'm understanding this correctly, there's also a lot of efficiencies to the department by accepting this donation. So it actually is a kind of a cost benefit for the department in a way.
Well, I think it's just a huge cost benefit from the standpoint of the donation itself, economically. In this case, this partner came up with quite a bit of money to acquire this property.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Just to emphasize that again, Terry, I think that's an important aspect of this in mentioning the Wolf Nelson Stewardship Fund. The grant program requires cost share from the people that are applying for the grant. So it's really match money that matches up with the fund, which is an incentive for people to get out and really work hard for important conservation acquisitions. And that's kind of the stick that stirs the drink here, so to speak, that fund.
Yeah, absolutely. A fund that's completely oversubscribed.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, I think we are ready for a motion.
I move that we accept the donation with gratitude of the Lower Wisconsin State Riverway Grant County purchase.
We have a motion to accept from Robin. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Jeff seconds. Any further comments from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Land donation is accepted. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
And hang on, you got another one.
You bet.
We'll move on to item 4E. Easement acquisition and monetary donation under the Forest Legacy Program, Adams County. Terry Bay, Director, Bureau of Facilities and Lands, and Ron Gropp, Forest Legacy Program Coordinator in the Forestry Program.
Good morning again. The department is requesting approval to acquire 426.64 acres of working forest conservation easement from Kane's Sandy Ridge LLC for $704,000 for the Forest Legacy Program in Adams County. Additionally, and accept a monetary donation in the amount of $193,659.50 from the Nature Conservancy towards the purchase. This acquisition will be financed with, as mentioned, the donation from the Nature Conservancy and a federal forest legacy grant in the amount of $528,000, which is 75% of the acquisition. If approved, the department also requests establishment of the official name Sandy Ridge Forest Conservation Easement under the authority of MC 2281.1. The acquisition of this forest legacy easement will protect and preserve the integrity of these important forest lands in perpetuity, prevent forest fragmentation, and promote use of sustainable management practices. The property, as I mentioned, consists of 426.6 acres, including remnant pine oak barrens that represent some of the best opportunities for restoration in the state. Wetlands include extensive meadows, wet prairies, and riparian woodland. Oak barrens, oak savanna, oak jack pine forest, and red and white pine plantations present on the property will provide valuable upland habitat for numerous plant and animal species. This conservation easement will protect and expand the footprint of this rare forest community through reforestation efforts and will also expand the protected footprint of the adjacent Quincy Bluffs State Natural Area and the Central Sands Pines Conservation Easement acquired in 2013. A designated access corridor for foot traffic will allow the public to access adjacent owned lands through this property. Motorized access will not be granted. The department has received resolutions of support from the local units of government, Adams County, and the town of Quincy for this acquisition. As I outlined, this request is a working forest conservation easement for the Forest Legacy Program. We realize that it's been some time since we've brought a Forest Legacy project to the board. So to that end, I would like to bring Ron Gropp, the Forest Legacy Program Coordinator, up to outline some of the cornerstones of the Forest Legacy Program.
Thank you, Terry, and welcome, Ron.
Thank you very much, Board Chair, members of the board, and Secretary Hunt. Thanks for having me here today and being able to speak on behalf of the Forest Legacy Program. Forest Legacy Program is a federal program that is delivered in partnership with state lead agencies. Wisconsin DNR Division of Forestry is the state lead agency delivering this program here in Wisconsin. It's been around for quite some time, authorized in the 1990 Farm Bill. Wisconsin entered the program back in 2000 with our first easement acquisition occurring in 2002 with our 35,000 acre Tomahawk Timberlands acquisition. Since then, we certainly have a successful track record protecting over 360,000 acres now with a combination of federal and state source funds. The primary purpose of the Forest Legacy Program is essentially to protect environmentally sensitive forests from conversion to non-forest use. That's really the primary purpose, and to keep working forests working. Those are two very incredibly important objectives for Division of Forestry, is to minimize or reduce the amount of forest fragmentation and parcelization that we see occurring on the landscape. And to the benefit of these landowners, this is an entirely voluntary program that landowners come to us and say, hey, we want to protect our land with an additional land use restriction. And the tool that we use principally is the conservation easement. So in exchange for protecting this property in perpetuity, we get good conservation, we get sustainable forest management, we get wildlife habitat benefits and things in those regards. The federal program offers 75% of the cost to acquire these easements. There's a 25% match. For this particular acquisition, as you heard Terry state, that 25% match is being brought forward by our partners in this project, the Nature Conservancy. So we're really excited about this. I can speak on behalf of the landowners. They're very excited about this as well. This is an ownership owned by 4 siblings. And just so very excited to be able to protect their property going forward. So with that, I'll take a pause and I'll just leave it open for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Ron. We have no public speakers for this item. Are there questions from the board? There. Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ron. So the property is currently in managed forest law, MFL?
It is.
Yeah. So with the easement, does it stay in MFL? Because it says the family will continue to manage the property?
It may stay in MFL, but MFL landowners can withdraw from MFL at any time. So MFL is not necessarily a permanent protection on the property, whereas the conservation easement is. So even if the landowners decide to withdraw from MFL, the easement will stay in place and continue to protect that property. And if that is the case, they still have to continue managing with an approved forest management plan.
It would be similar to what they have now, MFL.
In terms of management, correct?
And then do they, and you may not be able to answer this one, so do we, this may be a Terry question. We look at cultural resources on these kinds of properties when we set them into easements or when we purchase some, you know, are the cultural properties in there? Are they figured into management?
Absolutely. That's part of our review process. It's also part of the criteria that we have to address when we go before and are seeking the federal funding for these projects. We have to demonstrate that we have at least researched and identified if they are present. In this particular case, we did that review and found that there were no cultural resources present on the property.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Other questions? Robin?
So just to also clarify, because this is sort of new to me, this doesn't remove the property from local tax rolls, is that correct?
That's correct. It stays in private ownership and on the local tax rolls. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I have a couple, Ron. Some of our earlier Forest Legacy acquisitions, large chunks of property, and they included public access for recreation. In this case, public access, the NBOAs aren't mentioned as part of this. I understand they would not be guaranteed by this Forest Legacy acquisition. Could you talk a little bit about that, how this program and this particular, and maybe Terry would be in a better position to do that, how this is different from the other Forest Legacy acquisitions that did provide public access for recreation? I know this provides a corridor to get people through the property onto adjacent public lands, which is good and valuable. It's certainly a public benefit. But the other legacy acquisitions allowed and required the NBOAs for public recreation.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be happy to address that. I think the one notable difference here with this particular acquisition is that this is a small, non-industrial private forest landowner, right? So it's a small woodland owner. As opposed to our previous acquisitions, they tend to be the traditional large private industrial ownerships. And so very, very different constructs in terms of the ownership type. The second thing that I would mention is the fact that they are enrolled in MFL. Their current status is closed, right? So it's in closed MFL status. And so we would not require them to change their status by virtue of the fact that we would be placing a conservation easement on that property. And then the third point I would make is the funding source for this particular project came through the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Forest Legacy Program saw an infusion of about $700 million under the IRA Act. And the Forest Service at the time chunked out 3 different buckets: large landscape, small strategic, which this one fits into, and then tribal partnerships. The expectation, the thing that we had to demonstrate with our federal partners was the enhancement of access to adjacently owned, protected, or conserved properties, not necessarily access on the property. And so that's how this access corridor came into play in terms of facilitating ingress and egress by the public over and across the property to get to the adjacent state-owned lands.
So it'd be more of an indirect arm's length opportunity for NBOA recreation just by providing the public access to get to other public lands.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Very well.
I think there's a fourth element there that we should note.
Terry, could you step up to the
Yeah,
mic?
I think there's a
Thank
fourth
you.
element we should also note there is this one has a partner through the Nature Conservancy. The other Forest Legacy easements had stewardship. So it is a requirement to have all 5 MBOAs as part of that funding source. In this particular case, for these conservation values still allowing public access, the Nature Conservancy stepped forward with this large donation to hold the property as it is.
Well, and you mentioned conservation values. To me, that it looks like there's a number of less direct public benefits associated with this that people maybe overlook with the more usual stewardship match to the money. In this case, the source of the funding doesn't require the public recreation, but it does enable protection of very important ecological habitats of non-game species and the indirect benefit of improved access. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is a little different package than what the public has seen, but it does provide significant public benefit as part of the protection for working forest.
And I think just that important note of support from the local units of government in this area, where we have letters of support from them for these goals.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I have not made a recommendation yet. And I just wanted to remind the chairman of that. We are requesting that the board approve the purchase of the working forest conservation easement on 426.64 acres from Kane's Sand Ridge LLC for $704,000 for the Forest Legacy Program in Adams County, and approve the acceptance of a monetary donation in the amount of $193,659.50 from the Nature Conservancy towards the purchase price. Also, that the board establish an official name on the subject property of Sandy Ridge Forest Conservation Easement under the authority of MC 2281.1, that a certificate of appreciation be sent to the donor, and that an expression of appreciation be made a part of the official records from the Natural Resources Board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Any further questions from the board? I have one clarification that just came to mind. I also had a question about the public corridor access through this property. And the description was that it's not really a defined pathway, but more it's a little larger area to allow people to walk through the property to reach other adjacent ones. It was a little bit cloudy definition. Will there be some kind of signage or something for the public so they know they're in a place that is acceptable?
Yeah, that would be the department to coordinate with the landowner in making sure that the public accesses the property at the correct points. Absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Hearing none, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make that motion, Chair.
Is that a motion to approve?
To approve, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Doug moves approval. Is there a second?
I'd second.
Second from Robin. Any further discussion?
It was really lengthy, so I just said I'll make the motion.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to open forum. We have 6 speakers signed up to appear today. And our first speaker under agenda item 5, open forum, is Jim Olson. Jim is from Madison, representing petitioners on the revised Home Lake Rule petition. And I also want to note Jim has submitted significant written materials to the board as well with some of the background information supporting your remarks. Welcome, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Smith, Secretary Young, members of the board. I'm going to deviate just a moment based upon the last speaker. I mentioned last time that I caught my first muskie 76 years ago. It was on the Manitowish Chain. I honeymooned 12 years later with my wife on the Manitowish Chain. The Manitowish Chain has now been infested with spiny water fleas, which is tragic. But just to digress, the person sitting in the back of the boat when I caught my first muskie was my father, Paul Olson. My dad, Paul, was the founder and longtime president of the Wisconsin Nature Conservancy. So it was kind of thrilling to hear his legacy continued. Now, there's no question that the ballast systems in these boats spread invasives. And in fact, the department acknowledges that problem, the scientific lab acknowledges that, but let me just read, which proves beyond a reasonable doubt what goes on. This is from the Malibu 2024 Wake Boat Manual. Flush the ballast system. These procedures have been developed to help prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, especially quagga and zebra mussels that attach and infest inside ski wakeboard boat ballast tank systems. Flushing the system with hot water, 120 degrees or greater, kill quagga and zebra mussel juveniles and larvae in seconds and protect water bodies from the many destructive invasive species that hitchhike on the trailer watercraft. I will leave copies of this with Ashley so the board can see. This proves beyond a reasonable doubt. The manufacturers admit the problem. The question is, I've been here before you so many times, I'm sure you're sick of hearing from me, but who should pay for this? I'm a trial lawyer. I've tried many products liability cases. It's always been the case that the manufacturer and sellers who are responsible for the problem should provide the remedy. I don't see why the public should have to pay for these flushing systems. That should be on the manufacturers and the sellers of these products. They're the one that profit from these boats, some which cost $500,000. Is there any reason why the public should have to bail them out? If you pass a home lake rule, which I've asked you to do many times, what we were saying is if you want to take these boats from one place to another, you're going to have them decontaminated. And that should be the responsibility of the manufacturer and the dealers. These systems don't cost all that much. I mean, they cost maybe $40,000 for one. This should be their responsibility. It's absurd to say that we can't go through with this because the public isn't willing to spend the money. I'm just going to conclude by saying I'm a beneficiary of the public trust. You are the public trustee. I think it's time to start fulfilling your responsibilities under the public trust doctrine. I'm open to any questions or any criticisms of my suggestion.
Thank you, Jim. Sometimes I think we ought to have a chair here at the end of the table for you. Every meeting, you ought to be comfortable.
Well, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board?
I guess I don't necessarily have a question, just a comment that I really appreciate the passion that you bring and the fact that, we're continuing to see perhaps degradation of lakes from these types of activities. And I hope that that there can be some common sense in the future as to trying to keep, especially the northern Wisconsin lakes, free from those kinds of species. It's a very disturbing.
I appreciate your comments. And as far as the Manitowish chain is concerned, which is very dear to my heart, that is Spider Lake, which was where they were found, is adjacent to Highway 51. There's a great public boat launch on Spider Lake. We have been involved with the people from Manitowish Waters to getting an ordinance passed. We were fortunate it was passed late this summer. Too late, of course. Expanding water fleets already were there. But we did get it passed. We were taken to court. They tried to enjoin, the Wake Surface tried to enjoin enforcement of it. And the judge threw the case out, saying that there was a reasonable basis for it. So it's a big problem. It's time for the public trust doctrine to step in and help us.
Other questions from the board? I have one comment, Jim, that you might want to respond to. Literature that you submitted to the board and your testimony indirectly referenced the threat of invasive species. You submitted documents to the board that showed a dramatic increase in infestations of invasive species in Minnesota lakes. And I can personally attest to the influx of wake boats from Minnesota on every weekend coming into Wisconsin, particularly to the west, northwest, northern parts. All of those boats are carrying water in them, and that water came from Minnesota lakes. The message I got out of that is there is a tremendous and rapid increase in infestations of these invasive species in our inland waters. I'm not attributing this to wake surfing, but you've identified it as a very important vector that has the potential to aggravate that. Could you comment on that, please?
Oh, yes. I was right after we heard that the spiny water fleas had shown up in the Manitowish chain. I think it was a week later I found out this 41% increase in infestation in Minnesota waters, primarily zebra mussels. Yes, our group, Last Wilderness Alliance, has gone around to many communities to try to get reasonable regulations. And they're, especially in the northwestern portion of the state, Burnett County, the people were very concerned about boats coming in from Minnesota. And there was really boats coming in from other places that really drove these ordinances that were able to get it in effect. But we can't do it by ourselves. We probably have protected 335 lakes with our ordinances. There are thousands more out there that need to be protected. And, will I be coming before you again, giving you the latest statistic as another one that has been destroyed? I hope not. And it's not only northern Wisconsin, southeastern Wisconsin. I mean, we have quagga mussels now. Those are a real disaster in Lake Geneva. And you look at the water quality, the calcium content in southeastern Wisconsin. All those lakes are susceptible. It's time to do something.
I just thought it was an important part of your message to emphasize the urgency and the time sensitivity in terms of the rate of the infestations we're dealing with. And as time goes on, the problem gets bigger and bigger.
And I'm willing, as I said last time, to meet any time with staff, to see if there are ways we could tweak things so that it can get going so we don't mess up another boating season.
Thank you, Jim. Robin?
So, and perhaps this has been discussed in the past and I'm not remembering it. Does Minnesota, does the state of Minnesota, are they putting laws into place with respect to what's the status? Because they seem to be more on the forefront of the research. And as you said, if they're seeing this 41% increase in invasive species, are they being more proactive on statewide legislation?
No. So far as I know, there's only one lake, Caribou Lake in Minnesota, where they've attempted to do something. Now, we are fortunate here because we have a statute that permits local regulations. And, Last Wilderness Alliance has been responsible now 60, I think as of last night, maybe 68 communities that have passed things. Minnesota doesn't have that. So we are, able to do something. And I'm very proud of what we've done. But we're only 10% there. And maybe, by the time we get to 20%, I won't be here and you won't need that chair for me.
Thank you, Jim. Other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, well, thank you. And I will leave with Ashley from the manual. You already have your own regulations that I submitted, which are basically the same, which are also ignored. So I'll submit that. So now you have the proof beyond a reasonable doubt as to what can be done with this by both the boating manufacturers and your own DNR guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Carol Phillips from Presque Isle, representing herself, and the topic is wake surfing. Welcome, Carol. I can see you clearly. How's our audio?
Hi, thanks so much. Carol Phillips, a retired former registered professional civil engineer. We often hear that the science can justify either side of the wake surfing issue. Not true. Last month, I showed why the National Marine Manufacturers Computer Study by FAA is not valid. Today, I'll talk about the other industry wake surfing study paid for by the Water Sports Industry Association by Gaudi. The study itself is quite good, but the authors never made recommendations. It was a WSIA, not the authors, that analyzed the data and concluded surfing 200 feet from shore is okay. The engineers that did the study for them never recommended 200 feet or any other distance. In fact, they found that after 200 feet, the surf wake was still 16 inches high. The engineer's graph indicates that roughly 500 feet would be needed to equate to surfing for the same boat cruising at 100 feet. But the WSIA employees ignore that graph, claiming wind waves are the real problem, writing, a wake surfing boat passing a section of shoreline every 9 minutes is less damaging than naturally occurring waves from a 10-mile-per-hour wind with 1 mile of fetch. Their gentle breeze creates waves only about 4 inches high, not a problem for shores and docks, but those 16-inch surf waves can be devastating. It appears that the employees misinterpret the engineer's confusing table, showing that a 16-inch surf wave has the same total energy as dozens of little 4-inch waves. Professor McFarlane of Australian Maritime College describes the problem with the employee's claim, explaining that the total energy might be the same, but not the damage. McFarlane's analogy is that dropping a small coin millions of times can have the same total energy as dropping a car off a roof. The former inconsequential, the latter catastrophic. Only the most exposed shores of Wisconsin's very largest lakes experience big wind waves and have acclimated, but the vast majority of our shores never experience wind waves like that and are not acclimated and will be damaged by those 16-inch surf waves. Comparing wake surfing to conventional boating is more helpful. For that, Gaudi's graph appears to agree with many other studies, including McFarlane's and the University of Minnesota, which show at more than 500 feet is needed. Let's see, that 200 feet from shore rule that some states have adopted for wake surfing is based on a misinterpretation of data by employees of an industry group and buttressed by that fully discredited computer study by the other industry group that I spoke to about last month. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Are there questions from the board? Hearing none, thank you very much, Carol. Appreciate your clarification on those study results and recommendations.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Melissa Smith from Madison, representing herself and speaking about Endangered Species Act and the State Wildlife Action Plan. Melissa. Okay, we'll move on. Our next speaker is a virtual appearance, Scott Thulian from Appleton, representing himself and opportunities to increase hunters in Wisconsin. Welcome, Scott. I see you on the screen. Can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning,
right,
everyone.
great.
Yeah, my name is Scott Thulian, and I would like to present to you some ideas, some of my ideas and thoughts on how to increase hunting revenue for the DNR and the Wisconsin State Park System. A little bit about myself. I'm an avid outdoorsman, outdoor enthusiast, as you can see on my screen there. And I grew up hunting in Wisconsin. I've been hunting statewide for over 50 years. Started hunting in South Rock County, Iowa County. Was part of a traditional northern Wisconsin deer camp in Price County, hunted in Vilas County, hunted some years in the central part of the state, Columbia and Juneau County for years, in the central part of the state, and hunted over in the west, Buffalo County, and now east in Calumet, Wapaka, and Door County is where I currently reside in the Fox Valley area. So getting into what I'm thinking can be done to help is Wisconsin has very little exposure as a hunting destination. I'm an avid podcast listener and stuff like that. And, you know, I hear a lot of people talk about, hey, where do they go? You know, they talk about a rutcation, if you ever heard that term, you know, if you're a hunter, stuff like that. And, you know, people talk very little about going to Wisconsin. We do have some outdoor or some out-of-state hunters and stuff, and there used to be a lot more. But now there's not as many as there used to be. You know, right now people talk about the big ones are Iowa for sure, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Lower Michigan, Kansas, and Canada are some of the prime opportunities people like to go. You know, and we look at the impact of hunting has across the Midwest and that, you know, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry just in our Midwest. Waterfowl, elk, turkey combined don't even equate to that much of an industry impact. And like I said, you know, listen to that, you know, there's very few people, podcasters, I want to say, and podcasts that talk about going to Wisconsin. So as a destination, and you know, and I think that's something we can actually change and make Wisconsin more of a destination to help the revenue. And here are some of my ideas, and some of this could be too from, and some of those states that I've just talked about, you know, president of EHD is a big one. I've heard in podcasts people talk about, you know, they hunt in Ohio has a large outbreak, and there's been other states, you know, and in Iowa and stuff like that, where they've had larger outbreaks, and people have said, hey, I'm going to go look at another place to hunt. I want to find another place to go and a destination. So I'm thinking, why not Wisconsin? So, you know, my thinking is that, no pun intended here, but grow it as a destination and they will come. So how do we grow these opportunities for hunting in Wisconsin? How do we do it? Well, I think from the deer hunting standpoint, if we increase the deer herd in the northern part of Wisconsin, due to the loss of the public land, you know, I used to hunt up there quite a bit, and there used to be a lot more deer than there is now. Not like it used to be. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, we had a large deer herd, and that's gone down. You know,
Scott,
go ahead.
Scott, excuse me, we have a 3-minute limit on remark, the guideline. I heard your main point, which is we don't get a lot of visibility outside the state of Wisconsin to bring people here.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to go into some examples of that. If you could try and summarize that briefly, I'll ask you a question on what some of those ideas are, and then you can extend your time a little bit. Thank you.
Absolutely. That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, my ideas would be, first idea is increase predator hunting. I think we can harvest more bears in the state. They're a big detriment to deer in the north. That's one aspect. The other aspect is increase hunting in state park system. Right now, we're only allowed to hunt in state parks a very limited time. I think we can expand on that in a couple different manners to allow people to come into the state, have a place to stay, and then also help with deer harvest in some of those very overpopulated deer populations in the state park system. And then we can do a lot of this through advertisement. That might be the only investment that's actually needed by the DNR or the state, is just the advertising, getting out there and letting the hunting public, so to speak, know, hey, Wisconsin's open for business. Come and enjoy all this land that we have. Like I said, I hunt quite a bit, and there's lots of it out there. And I think the state would benefit from more hunters and more revenue. So that's basically it in a nutshell on that. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? Well, we're in that great fall season, and hunting is progressing rapidly. So we'll see how our attendance shows up in the state of Wisconsin and see if we can improve upon that. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Okay, our next speaker is Florence Sandock from Viroqua. Florence is representing herself and speaking about Wolf Awareness Week and delisting the wolf. Florence, are you with us? Florence Sandock,
Yes.
Viroqua.
Yes.
Okay, I hear you, Florence. Welcome.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
I can see you now too, so we're good to go.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I wonder if you know about the book called The Lorax. Most of you probably do because you have children or grandchildren. That's a rather important book written by Dr. Seuss because he uses the word unless after a book that talks about the devastation of natural resources and the misuse of natural resources and the abuse to the point where we use it all up. We almost did that with the wolves, and then we had to start reintroducing them. And he says, the words of the Lorax seem pretty clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And here's the book, okay? I believe I'm talking to a group of people that do care and that do want to have things go better. We don't have a wolf problem. What we have is a deer problem. And we have a cost analysis, and I can send this information to you because we have limited time for me to go into all the statistics. But it costs the state approximately $16 million for a period of time, and I can give you the period of time for all of the deer car collisions. Wolves save the state $10.9 million annually by reducing deer vehicle accidents. We have something between 15 and 19,000 crashes every year. And that, in I believe it was 2023, killing 9 people, injuring 707. The wolves use the roadways. And when they use the roadways, they keep the deer out of the roads. So consequently, between 2001 and 2022, Wisconsin devoted $16 million to managing deer killed by cars. Dane County paid $78,320 to a private contractor in 2022 to manage the carcasses. We're spending an enormous amount of money just managing deer car collisions. Now, who's doing it right? Colorado. Colorado has passed a Proposition 114 in November of 2020, in which they have this was voted on by the public. And oh, by the way, let me tell you, 85% of Wisconsinites have a positive view towards wolves, okay? So the hunting people are 15%. That's who we're managing this for, 15% of the population. That doesn't make a lot of financial sense. What Proposition 114 does, because of wolf predation, is reimburse any farmers or ranchers that have a problem up to $15,000 per animal and up to $15,000 for vet bills. They have a huge program of free program, advising farmers and ranchers about better practices. They have devoted themselves to this project. They have range riders that go around and assess things before problems happen. That's what we need to do because it's a success. And if we devote ourselves to the right thing, then we're going to have a much better climate for our environment because the wolves, as we know, is a major predator and helps our ecosystem. And if you look at the Yellowstone experience where they were reintroduced into Yellowstone, they changed the whole landscape and there was more wildlife, okay? Let's not do something that doesn't work. And I'm going to basically finish up with a little analogy. There's a woman whose family always served ham every Easter, and they always cut the ends off the ham. And the woman said to her mother, "Why do we always do that?" She said, "I don't know. Ask your grandmother." She asked her grandmother, and her grandmother said, well, we never had a pan big enough. Let's stop doing what doesn't make sense anymore. Let's not repeat the problems of the past. The last wolf hunt was a disaster. And now we're trying to manage dogs and hunting dogs and times when people can report in. This is all irrelevant. Let's stop the hunt. Let's go with a non-lethal method and commit to it. That's what I'm asking this board to do. It's time to act. And you, as caring people and also
Thank you,
people
Florence.
fiscally responsible, please
you're-
go ahead and do that.
You're well over your 3 minutes. I think we got your message very clearly. And thank you for appearing before the board. Does any of the board members have questions?
I will,
Okay, hearing
I
none.
will
Thank you, Florence.
comments so that you can look over the figures.
Yep, we'll look forward to receiving those materials.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, let me go back on our list of appearances. I understand Melissa Smith's available now. Okay, Melissa, you're next from Madison, representing herself again on the Endangered Species Act and the State Wildlife Action Plan. Welcome, Melissa.
Okay, I can't believe you didn't say of no relation this time. So thank you for having me. I'm just going to pull up my notes here. I'm not feeling incredibly well today, so thank you for accommodating me. Good morning, Chairman and members of the board and Secretary. I'm Melissa Smith. I'm here today as a concerned citizen and advocate for Wisconsin's imperiled wildlife. Excuse me. Really not doing very well. Sorry. We are facing an unprecedented crisis. The federal government shutdown has left wolves, northern long-eared bats, whooping cranes, swans. Even our Great Lakes fisheries they're in real big trouble. During the last shutdown that we had, Wisconsin lost an estimated 6% of its wolf population in 30 days. Because without federal staff and with them furloughed, there's no one enforcing these Endangered Species Act or monitoring illegal kills as much as Wisconsin wardens have to do, especially during coming up in the fall season and now. And clearly they have a lot to do. I mean, our northern long-eared bats, they were reclassified in 2023 because of catastrophic decline. And we lost 90% of our northern long-eared bats. 90%. And without that federal oversight, without the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, without NEPA, without NOAA, without the EPA, without all of that funding, it's gone, you guys. It's gone. We just had a whooping crane, and it was poached during this time of just this small furlough. Our trumpeter swans were illegally shot already. And this is a problem. And this problem is going to continue. I do not believe that any of you on this board or myself or any speaker could have possibly anticipated where we are right now. It is chaos. And because of that chaos in Washington, we don't have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's essentially defunct. And it's not just that shutdown. The Congress is preparing new funding bills loaded with these policy writers that will threaten to dismantle wildlife protections, and not just for wolves. You know that I love the wolves, but grizzlies. But this is going to be ESA consultations, defunding bats, and it's Bat Week's coming up next week. We're in Wolf Week right now. This is not accidental. This is a deliberate attempt to weaken protections while the public is distracted from the everyday day that we wake up. This delayed sea lamprey treatments in the last shutdown is going to continue. It got cut. It's gone. He cut the funding 300%. And the lamprey populations will probably jump 600 to 700% in the Great Lakes. That's $7 billion fishery. When Washington abandoned its duty, I am asking you to step up. I'm asking you to be brave enough to be disliked. Strengthen our state endangered and threatened list. Reinforce protections for wolves. There's just nothing to stop. And bats, whooping cranes, swans, all imperiled wildlife. National Council of Environmental Legislators, Wisconsin Farmers Union, all support this. It is bipartisan. And state law remains enforceable. We can use this in this time to halt illegal activity and protect habitat. Look at these anti-wildlife riders in the next federal funding bill. We need to demand that we strip these provisions out. And that's my job, to stop the gutting of the ESA. But there's things you can do. And I really would act. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. This is it. Your support to look at these petitions, look at scientific affidavits, public campaigns, and make it politically impossible to ignore endangered wildlife. Let's make Wisconsin the hero. Be the hero. Be the John Muir. Be the this. Here you are. You're in here. Your history moment. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate your message and your concern. Thank you. Are there questions from the board? Okay, thanks again, Melissa. Board, we're a little past our break time at 10. We have one more appearance under open forum. We want to continue with that, and then we'll take a break after that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Our next appearance is Wendy Craley, Minocqua, representing herself and speaking about Wolf Awareness Week. Wendy, are you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me
All
okay?
right. We can hear you.
Okay, and I am having bandwidth issues up here, so we will have no video. I just need to make sure you can hear me. So thank you. If we can start the clock now, I've timed it 3 minutes. Okay. Thank you, Secretary. I know, I'm like ready. Okay. Thank you, Secretary Hunt, Chair Smith, and NRB members for the opportunity to speak today. I split my time between Ozaukee County and Oneida County, where we own 160 acres of forest land in wolf country. In February, I spoke with you about the importance of public education and outreach as a key factor in achieving peaceful coexistence with wolves. It is timely to talk with you during Wolf Awareness Week, which is an annual event proclaimed by Governor Tommy Thompson 35 years ago. Wow. The purpose of the event is to inform the public about wolves, illustrate challenges to their survival, and encourage coexistence. It is critical to educate the public about their ecological importance and encourage action for their protection as the threat of federal delisting is happening right now. The Wolf Advisory Committee has convened, and they are prioritizing areas to focus on within the updated Wolf Management Plan goals. Educational outreach should be a top priority as it plays a vital role in fostering coexistence. This past summer, I continued to share fact sheets about our wildlife living among us, in addition to organizing a wildlife speaker series in Minocqua with local experts. We had 2 different wolf programs, most recently featuring Danny Deming's exceptional presentation titled Sharing the Land with Wolves. The wildlife series brought 200 participants from the Minocqua area across Wisconsin and as far as New Mexico and Oregon. Feedback was incredibly positive. Visitors shared that breaking news stories across social media platforms often portray wolves negatively. Danny's Wolf program helps to change false narratives by providing facts. She kept everybody in the audience engaged, and the impact was astounding. It warmed my heart to see what a young girl had learned from the program. When Danny asked for a volunteer from the audience, she raised her hand, and when shown pictures of both animals, was able to distinguish the difference between wolves and coyotes. The presentation covers all areas of the outdated publication posted on the DNR site, Sharing the Land with Wolves. I am asking for you to prioritize updating and distributing the Sharing the Land with Wolves materials as an ongoing effort to provide educational outreach and improve public perceptions. Some examples of cost-effective public outreach include scheduling quarterly speaking engagements with local community organizations across wolf country areas, collaborating with statewide volunteers to share materials to strengthen awareness and engagement, to provide a printed version of the DNR for the DNR outstations to replace outdated materials from the 1990s, and including a DNR bulletin email on a regular basis, for example, during this Wolf Awareness Week and bear hounding training hunting seasons. In conclusion, peaceful coexistence with wolves is achievable through a robust public education and outreach program. Thank you for your leadership and commitment to our natural resources. Did I make it? 3 minutes?
You made it just fine, Wendy. I'm about ready to offer you a contract to manage our timer here on appearances.
I practiced it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments and sharing your experiences. I think we got your message loud and clear that you would like to see the WOC materials updated. Any questions or comments from the board? Robin?
Yeah, I'm wondering if that program that you described in Minocqua was recorded and if it's available for viewing by the public.
Unfortunately not. That is on the plans for upcoming presentations and programs. So on a quarterly basis, we'll be doing more wildlife programs and absolutely want to ask Danny back because like I say, she just did an amazing job. It was an hour and a half. My message was not only to update the materials, but Danny's to collaborate with what Danny put together because I believe that was very up to date. It's just syncing up all these materials, showing there is another, I'll send you the material, a link to a coyote and wolf identification sheet that I didn't even know you had on your website that I believe Danny might have just created. So just having this, you know, again, reaching out to the public and saying we have these materials, that's it. So yeah, thank you.
Other comments, questions from the board? Okay, thank you again, Wendy.
All right.
That is the end of our appearances under open forum. We'll take our mid-morning break and be back at 10:25 when we'll resume the board meeting with informational items. We're on break.
you.
Well, I think we'll get them going. 25.
You better make sure he finds you when he looks around.
I'm trying.
Thank you.
Sorry to break up some good conversations, but we'll call the board meeting back to order and we'll resume at item number 6A, informational item. Now, under A, we have two informational reports, one from the Lake Michigan Commercial Fishing and one from Lake Superior. We're going to start out with Lake Michigan and get our presentations there and then give the board an opportunity for questions and discussion. And then once Lake Michigan is done, we'll move on and do Lake Superior in a similar fashion. So item 6A is the Lake Superior and Lake Michigan commercial fishing update. For Lake Michigan, we have Carson Cisneros, Great Lakes Specialist, and Charlie Hendrickson, who is appearing on behalf of Todd Stuth, the current Lake Michigan Commercial Fishing Board Chair. Charlie is, I guess, best described as past chair emeritus. Been in that position a long time. So with that, let's start with Carson. Welcome, Carson.
Thank you, Chair Smith and Secretary Young, and thank you to the board. My name is Carson Cisneros, and I am the new Great Lakes Specialist for the Bureau of Fisheries Management. And so I'm excited to be here to provide the Lake Michigan portion of this commercial fishing update. So first I'll start out with just a summary of the Commercial Fishing Board. They advise the department on commercial fishing matters related to Lake Michigan. And so far in 2025, they've met 3 times. Most recently, they met last week. There are 6 members on that board right now, and there's currently 1 vacancy. So getting into a summary of Lake Michigan commercial harvest. The trends on Lake Michigan, I'll be talking about 3 species, lake whitefish, yellow perch, and bloater chub. And there are 34 fishers that hold 48 licenses for Lake Michigan. And so this first graph is showing whitefish harvest from 1990 to 2024. And on the y-axis, we have thousands of pounds harvested. And the blue bars represent Lake Michigan harvest, and the yellow bars represent Green Bay harvest. So what you can see that is that in Green Bay, you're seeing an increasing trend in harvest, and in Lake Michigan, there's a decreasing trend in harvest. And for both of these areas, they have separate quotas, and they were both for both areas, the harvest was under the quota. So now moving on to Green Bay yellow perch commercial harvest. This is from 1983 to 2024. All of the commercial harvest for yellow perch happens in Green Bay and was harvested by Gillnet in 2024. And the harvest was just over 51,000 pounds. And that was a little over half of the commercial quota for 24. And moving on to bloater chub commercial harvest, this is a similar graph. This species is a smaller fish. If you've never heard of a bloater chub, they are a relative of lake herring, and they are historically an important prey food for larger predators. And when they are caught and sold, they are usually eaten as smoked fish. And there's 2 areas where commercial harvest of bloater chub occurs. So there's a northern zone and a southern zone. But in 2024, bloater chub harvest was all Gillnet. It was 6,000 pounds, and it was only in the southern zone. There was no chub harvest in the northern zone. And this is not generally a highly sought after fish, so it was mostly incidental catch. So this is the last graph I have for Lake Michigan, and it shows the estimated value of the 3 fisheries that I just described. So whitefish is the blue line, yellow perch is the purple line, and bloater chub is the green line. And so the value is based on the amount of harvest and then the price. And throughout the time series, whitefish has remained the highest value fishery. For whitefish, the 2024 value was estimated around 2.8 million pounds. Yellow perch was around $260,000, and bloater chub was estimated around $30,000. And as you can see, yellow perch has had the least amount of fluctuation throughout the time series, and the other two have had more variability in estimated value. And these last few slides are some updates on recent Lake Michigan commercial fishing rules. So a rule to allow trawling for whitefish in Lake Michigan went into effect in May of 2020, and it did have a sunset of October 31st of this year, 2025. And so this rule allowed trawling as a legal gear for harvesting lake whitefish in previously approved Lake Michigan areas. And along with that is a requirement to use cameras on board the boat to monitor harvest and bycatch. And the new trawling rule to replace that sunset came to this board in February and April of this year. And so that sunset was removed and this revised rule went into effect October 1 this month. So that took care of the sunset issue. And then the last rule that I'll talk about is the Lake Michigan Lake Trout Scope Statement. And before this scope statement was drafted, there was a stakeholder group formed that met throughout 2023. So those meetings are kind of shown on the left side of this slide. And then after these meetings occurred, the scope statement was then developed and drafted and went through the approval process. And it was published in the Administrative Register in 2024. Early this year, the NRB approved a preliminary public hearing, and that was held on February 13th of this year. And so during that public comment period, at the preliminary public hearing, the department received 298 comments from individuals and organizations. So there was a lot of engagement. The department reviewed all the comments submitted along with the previous input that had been received through stakeholder engagement efforts on the topic. And then after much consideration and including stakeholders' thoughts and ideas, the department determined that the scope statement and commercial harvest of lake trout would not be pursued through that scope statement at this time. And the department is committed to the continued rehabilitation efforts of lake trout in Lake Michigan and will continue to work with all of our partners to assess through research and monitoring the lake trout population in Lake Michigan and continue tracking that rehabilitation. And then the decision that the department made was communicated to those engaged in the process on September 19th, so last month. And that last bullet is really important. So there are continued conversations now happening between the Commercial Fishing Board and the department staff to discuss the next steps for lake trout opportunities and data inputs into the lake trout model. And that concludes my portion of this update. Thank you.
Thank you, Carson. Are there any questions for clarification from the board before we move on to Charlie? And then there'll be opportunity for more questions at the end.
I just ask one
Go ahead,
quick
Robin.
question. Carson, for your graph that showed the by year, the various species with the blue line and the purple line and the green line. So the blue line seemed to jump up after 2020. Was that because of the trawling rule?
So something I will note is that these are not all corrected for inflation and on one same dollar value. So that could be just reflective of prices increasing and not necessarily harvest increasing. But we can go back to whitefish harvest. There is that increase in Green Bay harvest. So it could be a reflection of price and harvest multiplying to show that. And there has been, I don't have the proportions right now, but in Lake Michigan harvest, that's the only one that trawling is contributing to, and that's those blue bars. So those are, a little bit smaller of a proportion.
Thank you. Yep.
Any other questions from the board for clarity? And again, we'll have a chance to talk when Charlie's done. Charlie, you ready to go? Charlie Hendrickson, representing Todd Stuth, the current chair of the Lake Michigan Fishing Board, and Charlie had been the previous chair for many years, so familiar ground. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thank you. Board members, Secretary Hun, who I've never met before, but I've heard good things. Chairman Smith, glad to be here. I believe you are the 10th secretary, I've appeared before.
Huh.
So I've been doing this a while, going way back, and I've had some great relationships with many of them. I didn't renew my commercial fishing license last year, and part of the reason I did that is it made me ineligible to be chair of the fishing board. And I really thought it was time for a change for a couple of reasons. But I didn't feel like could be dragged back in to running that board. And yet here I am. So, so it's funny how stuff works. But, you know, Todd Stuth is amazingly capable. He runs a very successful fishing business. He runs a research business that does mostly fish depredation to benefit other species all over the western United States. He works in Yellowstone Park. He's worked in different lakes there. He works with different things. He did a project last year in Lake Washington, which is in downtown Seattle. So he's very knowledgeable and very capable of running this group. There's a couple other issues with the group, but we'll get to them. But what happened when I stepped away, I think he expected more engagement from the department, that because he was the chair, that people were going to come and talk to him about the things we were concerned about. And that didn't happen. And then we had the lake trout scope statement that was mentioned hanging out there that we had been working on for, well, the first time it came up, we've asked about lake trout for 40 years, but it first came up in 2017. A member of this board suggested the department write a scope statement about commercial harvest and or bycatch of lake trout. So this went on, and we got stonewalled, and it didn't happen. So then we had a lake trout working group, which was a pretty good mix of people. And the question that kept coming up is, what happens if these guys go fish for lake trout? And we had people from the Quantitative Fisheries Center at Michigan State, and we had all kinds of different people talk to us. And the question kept being, well, what happens? So we said, well, give us 5,000 or 10,000 fish and we'll see what happens. It's not, you know, the make or break number that's going to affect the bottom line of trout rehabilitation. So we thought that was coming. Well, then the department, after this group met multiple times in public, didn't like where it was heading, or it appeared to me they didn't like where it was heading, where we were going to say that, and they opened it up to anyone who had listened in and had a big poll and said, oh, nobody's in favor of it. The Conservation Congress put it on their spring questionnaire, and people from all over the state who really had no interest or knowledge about this voted against it. Where I live in Door County was the only county, and this is where most of the commercial fishing in Wisconsin happens now. Door County, even at the Conservation Congress, which is not, you know, it's a sporting group, they still approved the idea that we would have a lake trout harvest. We met when we came here last spring for Door County Legislative Days. We met with two members of your staff. I think it was Mark Aquino and Kelvin Bolabuk at Senator Jock's office with some representatives of Door County, our economic development director and our county board administrator. And the message that both Senator Jock and Representative Kitchens said was that it's time that we give these guys access to trout. Trout were a mainstay of the commercial fishery until the lamprey wiped them out. So we then got the scope. The scope statement was created. And the scope statement, as I told the board, and many of you have changed, so I'm not sure who's aware of this or not, but there was many poison pills in the scope statement, and there was policy stuff in the scope statement. It wasn't opening the discussion to how are we going to accomplish this? It was limiting what's even possible. So of course there was huge noise about it and uproar and the 300 comments or whatever number Carson said. We thought we were past that. So we never were contacted or talked to about it. And then on September 19th, we got this decision where we had no meetings with the secretary's office. We had nothing communicated to the fishing board about where this was going or about how we could do this. There was some discussion with the legal staff about to what extent the scope statement could be modified or amended and still proceed under that. And we got the report from the legal staff. I think Cheryl Heilman was still involved then, that it could be amended. You know, it was about lake trout, and it should have came to you, and you should have had the opportunity to hear the comments and or get a revised scope statement from the department, which is what the public hearing is supposed to be about, is they take that and change whatever's there and then give it to you for a decision. So hearing that it was just vetoed is the word we heard. I wrote a letter that I think, I hope you guys all got. I know Ashley distributed it for me, expressing our displeasure. And then what, I don't know if it was coincidental. Maybe it was that the new secretary's getting up to speed. Maybe, who knows? But suddenly there was some contact from department staff with Todd Stuth. He's come down there and he's met with the secretary. He thinks they've had some productive discussions, and we're hoping that we can use that scope statement to just create this assessment fishery, which is all we've been asking for all these years. And, you know, the bottom line there, that we're committed to rehab. We are too. We've done all kinds of things. 30 years ago, we took our boats and harvested eggs and put them in AstroTurf mats on the reefs out off of Door County, trying to spawn lake trout. You know, that was done in Lake Superior with some success. We're not sure just how much it was, but we're not sure we had put those eggs in the right place because we didn't have an actual spawning stock. But now we have a spawning stock. Lake trout are reproducing, and they're reproducing because the alewife population collapsed. So what they found is that alewife, and it first become apparent in Lake Huron when the alewife completely collapsed, and suddenly lake trout were reproducing there. So the deciding factor in success of lake trout successfully rehabilitating is what their diet is. There's an enzyme in alewife that prevents lake trout rehabilitation. Is that the worst joke we've ever heard after 50 years of planting lake trout, that it's their diet and the alewife? So now we're managing the lake to maintain an alewife population for the silverfish, for the salmon and the other fish. So this idea that we're completely committed to rehabbing a natural species just isn't true. So the question that I would put to the people who are giving you information is, what would the detrimental effect of the commercial fishery harvesting 5,000 or 10,000 lake trout? And as you can see, if that's where you set a quota, the way the quota systems work and the individual allocations and all of that, we're never going to completely fill a quota. It's only happened once or twice in the whole 40 years of quota fishing. So we hope we can get back to that point. We hope that that you guys would be committed to looking at that. It just seems to make sense. And we are where we are. We're 60 miles from the Northern Refuge. So the fish we stopped planting here in Wisconsin the federal government took and dumped them on the Northern Reef, about 55 miles from my harbor where I fish out of. And, you know, they talk about the trout being, but they move. You know, we know that the trout they plant on the mid-lake refuge comes to shore. So enough about lake trout, but that's where we are, and we're very happy that you're at least considering ways that we can move forward without having to go back and start the whole scope statement thing again. So anyway, we're glad that we're talking. This whole thing of this whole summer of not really getting a lot of feedback. I know there's been changes in fish management. Today I met Carson for the first time. I met Eric Lobner for the first time. We're very excited about the direction we're going. And we hope that we can get back to a more collaborative relationship. So that's where we are. Anyway, one other thing that that's important here is, and we've talked about it for a long time, and it became apparent in the long-running whitefish saga, which almost mirrors the lake trout thing that Bill was intimately involved in. And, you know, we did a study, and the study got delayed because we couldn't get a monitor, and we tagged fish for the department. We did all kinds of things, and then it waited and waited. We thought we had an agreement. Then a green sheet showed up on Friday night of Martin Luther King holiday. I pulled my hair out all weekend because it wasn't what we had agreed to, and it was going to come to the board, and Secretary Cole made the staff redo the green sheet. It didn't come completely back. It delayed our harvest increase by a year in Lower Green Bay, but it did happen, and it was all part of the split to the lake and the bay as far as quota goes. So I will, on the day it was adopted, Chairman Smith said publicly, "Gosh, Charlie, I guess you were right." So I hope you remember saying that.
I think that was with respect to the size and the health of the whitefish population in Green Bay.
Yes, it was.
And it proved itself out.
Yeah, that was, you know.
We were getting a lot of advice to see a more gradual increase in the quotas, and they're increasing yet.
And we have, yeah. So, anyway, I kind of lost my thought there. Now that you interrupted me, but I'm sorry. But what became apparent early in that thing is where we are now going to have a lake quota and a lake model and a bay model. Zone 2, and our quotas are divided between Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. Zone 2 is around the whole Door Peninsula, and it encompasses bay fishing and lake fishing. So we tried to find a happy medium, and but some of the staff said, well, we'll just allocate that differently. Well, our quotas, when they were established, the percentage of harvest we're entitled to was permanently allocated. And we buy and sell these shares, which so you can't just say, oh yeah, we're gonna disenfranchise somebody and take this from them. So we had huge discussions about that. We had meeting after meeting with George Meyer when he was the secretary, and we had the legislature involved, and it was changing the allocation authority from the fishing board to you, the resources board. And they said we could not self-regulate. We could not allocate stuff to ourselves. And it made sense, but it was very contentious. So if you look in the code where it gives you authority, it's a little bit ambiguous about what authority it gives you. Our contention is if there's a new quota, if we put a quota on burbot, you guys allocate it. But the quotas that have been allocated, lake perch, bay perch, whitefish, chubs in Zone 1, Zone 2, those are all permanently allocated. And there's been tremendous amount of buying and selling and trading of those. We regularly lease whitefish quota annually. So, and we produce a lot, but the original allocations are not subject to that. So when this came up, it popped into me that we don't have any institutional knowledge left in the department about our issues. So we asked for that and we started talking about it, and we had a couple meetings and everyone agreed it was a good idea. And then I suggested that we bring Pete Flaherty, who had been the lawyer when all this happened. We invite him. You know, he still lives in Madison here, and we invite him. Well, Pete and I were long-term antagonists. We often argued for a long, long time. But he came to the meeting, and for me to suggest, hey, let's bring Pete in, I like had to choke a little bit to say that. But he sort of verified what I was saying, and then that project kind of stopped. And your legal team did a bunch of work on it. They said, oh, we know kind of what happened, but we can't identify which rules made it happen. But we're going to keep working on it. So I think the last we had any real in-depth conversation about that was 2 or 3 years ago. In 2023, on the webpage about fishing, there's a story created, and it talks about 1873 and the start of fishing and a lot of that stuff. But the meat and potatoes of how our current management came up needs to be in a little booklet that new people who are working in fisheries, new members of the fishing board could easily understand. You know, I could talk to you forever about it, but there should be something that would give you, a new secretary, some background, because it's a very complicated situation. And there, you know, there's only a couple of us left, and there's nobody in the department that has lived through all of this. So we would very much appreciate it. Shonda Harvey has worked on it, and then she got going on other things, but she has all the basis to do it, but she needs to be tasked with completing it. We'd appreciate that, because I think it would benefit everybody. So that's one of the things.
Charlie, it'd be a good time for me. I failed to mention this when I introduced you, but you in your role of representing the chair of the Commercial Fishing Board have a flexibility in the amount of time available. You're not held to the 3-minute criteria that we do with other citizens that appear. And I always like to mention that because I want people to understand that your statutory charge to advise the board is not limited by 3 minutes of time. But at the same time, I urge discretion.
Well, you know, I've always said I will try to be brief, but I think this is an opportunity, and maybe it's my swan song, but you know, I think there's some stuff I need to tell you. I have a piece of paper here I was going to put over if you started flashing that red light. So anyway, so moving on, you know, we're food producers. We give everybody in Wisconsin access to that fish. In my personal business that I run with my son, we have a store, but we sell directly to restaurants and other fish houses. We estimate that we provide fish for 250,000 meals annually. And there's 2 other fisheries in Door County doing the same thing. So we're not, you know, we're a big part of the community, and we supply 25 restaurants, and we always have done that. Now we've gotten into a retail store, and we sell our wholesale products to other places. So we're a big part of the economy in Door County too. And Todd's business is just as big. Weberg's and Gills Rock supply restaurants is almost as much as we do, maybe more in some instances. So you know, I need to make that clear. We give everybody in Wisconsin access to that resource. If they want to eat a fish from Wisconsin waters, it comes through us. And we're proud of that. We're proud to be food producers. We take very good care of our product. And we need people to understand that. And we need that to be included in some of the decision-making about commercial fishing. You know, that you hear things like, oh, there's just 3 of us, or, oh, you know, their license fees don't cover the cost of the fishery. You know, that's all periphery. We're, by statute, we're supposed to have a viable commercial fishery. And, you know, that needs to be taken into account. I don't know why the legislature won't give you more money to manage our fishery, but you're still required by law to have a stable and viable commercial fishery. And we won't get into the stable part because the environmental disasters of the mussels and everything else, you know, have affected that as much or more than regulations. And regulations have really worked to consolidate our fishery. And those of us who have done that don't like to now hear, well, there's only a few of them left, let's get rid of them. You know, we don't want to hear that. That's not what should be said. And department staff should be saying that publicly when they hear that from other people. So that's her other thing.
Charlie, one more question for your comment, just to be clear. You used your company as an example, amongst other examples, and then you referred to we a couple of times. I took that to mean that your company was an example of what other people in the commercial fishing business are also doing in the state, and the we that you're referring to is the commercial fishing industry as opposed to your family business. If you could get the sensitivity of that.
Absolutely. You know, those economic impact numbers that Robin asked about, you know, that's dockside value, and nobody relies on dockside value. We're all doing value-added products, and I think some of that jump was that they finally started even talking. You know, the dockside value is 250% more than it was, not 250, 2.5 times what it was 10 years ago. So, you know, overall demand for food prices, it's all increasing. It's jumped again this year. So it's a good question, but that graph isn't exactly accurate, particularly for whitefish harvest.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's the royal we. You know, I guess I should say I, but I have a partner, so I get confused. Thank you. But a couple other quick things. Our licensing and reporting has become extremely difficult. We argued for electronic reporting forever. We started in some testing, and it was a pretty simple thing. And now it's gotten much more complicated because the department has asked for much more information. And we're not against giving the department information. We're looking forward to doing that. We're looking forward to especially doing that with lake trout. There's tremendous amounts of information we can give you. But, you know, but what happened is the Department of Administration got involved. And now, in order to make our electronic report that we're supposed to do before we hit the dock, we have to do 2-part verification like you do when you forgot your password to get into your credit card account. So it's amazingly complicated. So now the solution they've given us is that you can print out this paper report and fill it out. We thought we got rid of those 15 years ago, the paper reports. So you fill that out and then you enter it into your electronic reporting later, but it's very cumbersome. But we've run into where a lot of us have consolidated our licenses into what's called fleet reporting. But then because of the 2-part verification, I used to be able to give a boat captain my login and he could just do it. But now they have to text me the code, so he can't do it, you know. So it's just become unwieldy. And now there's going to be some changes in how we apply for our license. So I think at our meeting the other night, we decided that Todd is going to try and contact people in the Department of Administration, because because it's not working like it was supposed. It was supposed to be a simple thing that got you real-time information where you could click a button and know what the fishery did this past month, this past 6 months, whatever. This past year, we wouldn't have to wait till June to process all the paper reports. So that's good. We mentioned perch in the bay. There's a big uptick in perch in the bay, and you know, both the sport fishery and the commercial fishery is doing better. But because of the rule process that exists now, it takes 2.5 years to make a rule after a scope statement. We don't know if this uptick in perch is able to be taken advantage of in a timely fashion. But we really should have a scope statement for perch that gets us to where we are with whitefish now, where we run the model and the staff makes a recommendation, we get a chance to comment on it, and the board approves it. We need a more streamlined way. We tried to do that for chubs many years ago, and through a comedy of errors, it got killed in legislative review, which was unfortunate because it had fail-safes built in for us. So anyway, and we weren't aware of it till after the fact. Meaning the fishing board. There were some fishers who got a state senator who killed it. And in fact, he said, "Yeah, we took care of that for you, Charlie." I said, "Huh? We worked 3 years to create that rule. You did not do us a favor." And it's never come back. It's all there. We should just redo it. And I told Carson I try and be positive. So here it comes. We had a presentation at our fishing board meeting last week, reviewing our whitefish quotas. And as all the hype out in the big world, you know, has come to enlightenment, you know, the fish stocks in the Great Lakes in general are declining. We have a fair population in the lake. Right now, we're doing a little fishing. We meaning my son and I, Bill, but there's other people, and there's some fish in the lake. We're seeing some smaller fish, which we haven't seen much of. The assessments that the DNR is doing are showing some fish, but it's declining. So you're going to get a recommendation next month to lower the lake quota for next year. And we're okay with that. It does not, it still allows us to do what we consider assessment work for our own knowledge and fish just a little bit. But we want to be careful as this moves forward and it doesn't improve, that we don't cut that quota so low that we can't fish at all. Because, you know, the quotas are allocated. So we only have a percentage of it, and there's guys who aren't fishing. So the people who are going to fish and get you information need to still have some fish. And the other part of it is that while there's been a little bit less reproduction in the bay, there's still significant reproduction. And the recommendation is going to be to leave the bay quotas where they've been the last 2 years for the next 2 years, which so both of those we're happy with indoors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions?
At this point, we're wrapped up with presentations on Lake Michigan. So board have any questions for either Charlie or for Carson? Doug?
Just that last piece, Charlie, when you talked about what we can expect coming forward for quotas, we're talking just about whitefish or quotas for all?
Whitefish.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's right now the only quota we have on this system. You know, perch would have to go through the whole rulemaking process. So you can't just run the model and change it. That's what the rule is. We changed that as a leap of faith that we could trust the department to give us fair numbers. And it seems to.
Charlie, maybe that whitefish system will blaze a trail for perch and other ones. So
Well, that's what I'm saying. Now, that's what I'm
adjust the
saying. We need a perch scope statement to start that process, because, you know, it's not gonna take advantage of the perch that are out there right now, because it's gonna be 2 or 3 years, but it should happen.
That was gonna be my next comment / question, Chair, was, you know, how do we fix perch and chub? And it sounds like the model for whitefish might be the way to do it. We just need the scope statement to come and get that moving.
There is a whole rule, and it went through your board and our review and everything relating to chubs. And like I said, it got killed in legislative review, but it could easily just be brought back and run through the process again, and it would not get killed again. But you know, perch, I mean, chubs have been the biggest victim of the mussel infestation, and they haven't adapted. You know, whitefish that have recolonized the bay and are doing well, and there's parts of Lake Huron and there's isolated places where they're doing well, but the whitefish here, in my estimation, are like the most adaptable animal in nature. You know, they're surviving in different water temperatures. They're eating different things. They're spawning. You know, I'm sure. Well, I know you've heard me say, if I told the guys that I started fishing with 50 years ago that this is what we're doing to catch whitefish, I can hear old Marvin Weber saying, No, Charlie, don't pull my leg. So they wouldn't believe it. But anyway, that's where we're at. So
thank you.
We look forward to this.
Any other questions or comments? Charlie, thank you.
Yeah,
If that
thank
was your swan song, I'm glad I was able to be here and listen to it. Thank you for many, many years of service on the Lake Michigan Commercial Fishing Board. Okay, let's shift over to Lake Superior now. We'll go through a similar process here. We have presentations from Brad Ray and from Craig Hoopman. Brad is the Lake Superior Fisheries Team Supervisor, and Craig is the Lake Superior Commercial Fishing Board Chair. We have both of them on virtual. I see Brad Ray on the screen. Can you hear us all right, Brad?
We can. Thank you.
We can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me.
Try your audio again. We're not getting any sound here.
How about now?
Oh, that's much better.
So, all right. Thanks, Chair Smith. I'm Secretary Hoon. Members of the board, I'm Brad Ray, as was mentioned, the Lake Superior Team Supervisor, and I'm going to start the Lake Superior portion, and then I will pass it over to Craig Hoopman for the Commercial Fishing Board perspectives. So next slide, please. Very similar presentation that you just saw from Lake Michigan, talking about the Lake Superior Commercial Fishing Board that's statutorily comprised of 5 members on Lake Superior, and it is full, and we've met twice this year in 2025. Next slide, please. Similar idea. We're going to talk about the different harvest of the 3 main species and some the issues with the rules that are going through, and how we manage a little bit differently on Lake Superior than on Lake Michigan. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The first slide here is thousands of pounds of lake trout since 1990. You can see it's pretty standard, and that's because we do set a quota on lake trout. So we allow lake trout on Lake Superior, and that harvest is set every 3 years. As Charlie was mentioning, we do just recently change the way of changing the quota on Lake Superior, so that we will be coming in October of 2026 with the recommendation to be approved rather than the lengthy rule process. So we'll be much more efficient to change the quotas moving forward based off the population model, similar to how whitefish works in Lake Michigan. So next slide, please. Our whitefish, we don't use a quota here. We primarily manage through effort limitations, how much gear can be in the water, when it can be in the water, and where it can be in the water. And even though we do have a population model for Lake Superior, we use that more to track and make sure our management is appropriate, as opposed to setting quotas with that. You can see that there was a little bit of increase in 22, 23, and 24, and that will be reflected in the economic value on Lake Superior in a few slides. I do want to point out that the thousands of pounds here on Lake Whitefish is much greater than it was around 30,000 pounds for Lake Trout, and here we're over 600,000 pounds annually the last few years. Next slide, please. And we also have a quota set for Cisco or lake herring, the pelagic form of the chubs that you saw from Lake Michigan. We currently have a quota set for an additional 2 years. We're working on a joint methodology with our tribal partners to adjust the quotas in the future, and likely bring a new rule to the board in late 2027 that will also make it more efficient to change quotas in the future. And you can see again here, we're about right around 500,000 pounds of harvest by the state fishers in terms of Cisco. And this is a unique fishery that is primarily a road-driven fishery. So most of this harvest happens in the month of November. Next slide, please. The economic value here, you can see that, again, as Charlie points out, this is dockside value. So this is basically based off the wholesale price and doesn't add any of those value-added products. But whitefish is predominantly the majority, about 2/3 of the value of the fishery is from whitefish, and 1/3 is from Cisco, the green line there. So the blue line and Cisco make up most of the value, and Lake Trout is very low in terms of that, and that's because of the limited harvest opportunities of Lake Trout. And I think the next slide is just for questions.
Is there any questions of Brad for clarity on his presentation? If not, we'll move right on to Craig, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions for both of them at the end.
I just want to officially change the name here so I can slide the computer over and let Mr. Hoopman talk.
Welcome, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me, Mr. Chairman, Secretary, members of the board. I've got a pretty brief presentation today. The state of the lake is, like I've reported every year, it's actually phenomenal. What we're seeing right now are the whitefish, the Cisco, the chubs, working with the 2022 year class, which we've all known about. It's just, it's at record levels. It's off the charts. We're actually starting to see those small fish. They're not in the harvest yet, but we're starting to see them in our trap nets and in our gear. It's very remarkable that all 3 species had a banner year class in that year. And from a biological standpoint, I think we can all learn a lot from that and try to figure out exactly what happened. Was it ice coverage? Was it lack of wind? Or what happened where all 3 of these species had such a banner year? It's just, it's unheard of. And it's actually very bright for the future. Like Brad said, we revisit this quota in 2027, and the fishers do agree that Cisco year class will not be in the year class or into our fishery for another year or 2 years till we will really see them in abundance. And on that note, as of right now today, speaking with buyers and other tribal and state fishers, as of right now at this moment, it does not appear to be that there will be a Cisco fishery in Lake Superior this fall, which we would be normally starting up in around a week. It's not that it's not a fishery issue. It's a marketing issue, and the overseas market is saturated right now. Where primarily the eggs in Sweden, they're sitting on a surplus because of the ocean production is high, and they're sitting on an abundance of fish, which it's a trickle down effect. It comes back to us, and the prices that we've been offered to fish are roughly about 40% lower than last year. And at that current number, there's no way that we can fire up our boats and fish and pay our crew. So it'll be something you'll see some drastic changes in the Cisco harvest this fall, if any. We're still working. We're meeting with buyers daily right now, trying to find other markets for the carcass and something that's sustainable for the fishermen to actually fish. But it's a huge economic blow to the fishery. That's a lot of revenue to northern Wisconsin and also Door County, where these fish are all processed. That's a lot of people that are going to be in unemployment instead of being working. But hopefully we can make some quick changes on that, and if something comes out of it, great. But it's not looking very promising right now. And our summer, we saw a lot of really good fishing. I've been doing this all of my life. Like I said before, I'm the 6th generation. I've been on a boat since I was 8 years old, and my entire career in fishing pond nets and now going into trap nets, we've been handling whitefish, and our average fish for the majority of my career was just over 17 inches, and they were 1.2 to 1.3 pounds per fish. And now I released thousands and thousands of legal whitefish this summer, and we were just taking the 2-pound fish, 19 and a half, 20-inch whitefish, and to put them into our market, which offers us the process of fish that puts out an 8-ounce fillet, which for our stores and our current little restaurant we run right now, that's what we're looking for. But it's absolutely an amazing fishery. I tell you, we're so blessed to take a part of it. I can't really find anything negative in the fishery right now. Our eFirst system, which Charlie talked about, I understand his frustration with that because of the lack of cell phone service we have up here on our end. I actually am one of the captains that I do have a paper form on my boat that I fill out, and I keep it from net to net. And then when I get in, I transfer it to the eFirst system just because of lack of cell phone service. It's just very inconsistent. So when law enforcement does board us either at the dock or on water, it's there. I can hand them a paper copy and it's working. And then by the end of the day, we transfer that over in real time to make it done. There's a few little glitches in it as far as our crew card systems, where each of our members on our boat has to have a crew card. So we're working with Brand on that. It's getting changed up, and Brad is helping out so that we can actually go online and go into Go Wild and actually fill out this information so that we can get our own cards, because we're changing employees, adding employees, put people on the boat from time to time. It just make it easier for the fishers to have that, to be able to do that. The law enforcement side up right now here in our area, the 2 young men right now, we have Jack and Trevor. They're the water wardens, as what we call them. They're just specifically on the water and monitoring the sports side and the commercial side. It's been working really well. These 2 guys are in the community a lot. I do a lot of work with sportsmen's clubs, and these guys are very involved as well. So it's really nice to see the law enforcement side in the community working with everybody. It's a partnership that I have never seen before, and it's working really well. And we get a lot of feedback. They come up, they'll pull up to their boat, up to my dock, and hand out stickers to kids and stuff like that. And it's just getting them involved and just seeing the presence in the area, and also reflects back to running grid checks and monitoring both the sport and the commercial harvest on this side. And then one other thing I would ask is if there was any way the board could, or at least push and try to help. We all know that this is a data-driven age right now. And right now there's a lack of full-time employment in the Bayfield office. We've had some retirees up here, guys that I've worked with and been on my boat monitoring for the state. And right now, those we're down a person, and it's so important that they get on and ride with us and count these sublegal fish and look at the lake trout population and count what we're catching, what we're releasing, collecting the otolith. It's very, very, very important information to build quotas, to see what we need in the future, to see the sustainability of the fishery. So I would ask if there was any way, if you guys could help expedite filling these positions, because I had very limited engagement with people being able to. They're just down manpower, so they could not free up people to come ride my boat and collect this data. So I would ask that if there would be any way you guys could help us out on that, I would really appreciate it. And then the last thing that I like to mention in our board, we had a meeting last week, and I feel very strongly about the state of Wisconsin fishers, our 10 license holders up here in this end of the lake. We're still asking, we would like to be a part of the state tribal negotiations because it has such a big effect on our fishery. And I've said this multiple times, I have full faith in any of our license holders to sit in that meeting and be able to offer advice. We've got 150 plus years of fishing. I'm the 6th generation. My son is the 7th, who will in the very near future hopefully be sitting in this chair speaking to you all and actually running our boats for us. So I would ask that it's just very near and dear to my heart that we have representation in this meeting to offer advice, just because of the effect that it has on us. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions from the board? Sounds like you got an absolutely great fishery with a wonderful future. That's great to hear.
Yeah, it is, Mr. Chairman. It's very positive. It's very exciting. I'm very happy and proud to be a part of it. And we take a lot of pride in what we're doing up here and putting out a quality product. And we appreciate what you guys do.
Well, if we can find a way to transfer some of that productivity in spawning and food chain down to Lake Michigan, it'd sure be a help.
Yeah. I always like to listen to Charlie. It was good to see his face. I got nothing but respect for the man.
Okay, thank you much. Any questions from the board in general on the fishing reports? Robin?
So I have 2 questions from the Lake Superior perspective. Is somebody looking at or studying like what happened in 2022? I know there was a brief mention about, was it wave or ice cover, things like that, but is the department actually looking at that?
So the department's involved with a lot of projects that are going around. There's been a lot of diet work to kind of track what's going on, a lot of modeling on conditions. One of the reasons that we don't have a Cisco framework is we're trying to meld in how that might have worked. Really, it was environmental conditions were perfect, is really what it comes down to. And we know that the ramifications were huge. We saw it in every fishery, like coho salmon were the best year we've ever seen the last few years because of this huge influx of food for them as they were coming out of the tributaries. So we are working with a lot of our partners through the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, the Lake Superior Tech Committee, university partners, trying to figure out, but it looks like it's going to be stuff that's beyond our control. We don't control the weather, even though Craig might sometimes think what we do. We don't control the weather, and that's really what drove this. It was the perfect conditions for the year classes of all, like Craig said, all the fish.
Go ahead.
So my last question, Doug, did you have a question?
Go ahead,
Robin. Just from a fishery science perspective, by not harvesting Cisco, does that have any impact on positive or negatively on other species?
Right now, we sit at about 500,000 pounds roughly we've been harvesting, which is well underneath our quota. And the year class of fish that we've been targeting for the last 3 or 4 years is actually the numbers are getting smaller and smaller as we wait for this 2022 year class to get into the fishery. So these fish, if left alone, they'll go and spawn and do what they need to do. But I think the 2022 year class is so strong, it's going to overwhelm everything that we're seeing, as well as the whitefish and the chubs. We're seeing just multiple year classes of all three species.
And just to add a little bit to that is not direct effects, because the Cisco have now outgrown predation for most of the predators out there. They're 9-10 inches now. They're not really too much food, so the other fish aren't going to benefit from them, but they're going to live, and they're a long-lived species. So like Craig said, the year class before the 22 year class, we've been relying on as the predominant portion of the commercial fishery since 2015 that's the 2015 year class. And for the last 5 years, since 2020-ish, it's been the predominant portion of the commercial fishery. So just letting it out there one more year, if there isn't much harvest, will actually just maybe extend the ability to harvest until this next big year class comes up. So it could be a good thing too.
And I just wanted to make you all aware that you're going to look at charts next year and you're going to see this big drop off. And I just want to be very clear, it's not a sustainability issue, because we take a lot of pride in this. I've said this, we need to have the sustainable for the fish and also for the fishers, for all of this to survive. So I just want everyone to be aware of, when you see this drop off of basically no harvest, that alarms don't go off and say, oh, these fish aren't there. That's not the case at all. I truly believe in our whitefish fishery is as strong as it is because the state fishers stop fishing on September 30th. We do not partake in an October fishery or a November fishery. And I've said this multiple times. My grandfather always said, that was in this fishery for 75 years of his life, anytime anyone asked about fishing past September 30th, his response always was, if you can't make a living in this industry in northern Wisconsin between ice out in the spring and September 30th, you need to find another job. That was his philosophy. Leave the fish alone, let them reproduce. And our whole board feels very strongly about that. We take a lot of pride in shutting our boats down and shutting our nets down on September 30th to let these fish do what they need to do. They come to these areas one time a year to do one thing, and that's to reproduce. And we take pride in leaving these fish alone. And I believe 100% that this is why we have such a strong fishery.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Doug?
Chair, thanks. Thanks, guys, for the information. So my first question is on the Cisco. So is there any forecast on it overseas competition for the next couple of years? I mean, I know we know what we're going to see next year, but for about the following years, that going to decline?
We're hoping that if we don't partake in this fishery right now from a business standpoint, that this market will be sold off. If we fish this year for a cheap price, we'll put that back into the market, and we'll never see this price bounce back. Our product coming out of the freshwater is a way better product. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just we put out a better quality product than what they're putting out over there, but they're flooding the market with this right now, and they can sit on it, and then as it's needed, they can release it into the market. And we just don't want to. I've talked to Halversons and had lengthy conversations about even if the price goes up a little bit where we can fish, do we really want to saturate that market even further? So that it doesn't rebound next year, because at the numbers we're being offered right now, it's not sustainable for the fishers. There's no way you can run these boats and especially fish in November and early December in the middle of Lake Superior under these conditions. This started out at $1.20 a pound in the round in this market, and it's been on the decline, and now we're offered 55 cents a pound. It's just not sustainable.
Two more, Chair, if I can.
Sure, go ahead.
The other one's on the whitefish quotas. So that there's those increased whitefish harvests for the last 3 years. Are those even near quotas? And do you think there'll be an impact when we see 27?
So again, on Lake Superior, there is not a whitefish quota. So that harvest actually was the increased harvest. Part of that can be stemmed to that lake trout quota went up, and so you get more effort because lake trout went up. And so part of that is that, but as Craig mentioned, there's also the population is doing really well, and so catch rates have also increased in whitefish. And so really the whitefish is kind of capped at what is allowable to based off of effort and season restrictions that can be harvested in, and not necessarily a quota. And it's a good management strategy that's worked really well. As you can, if that figure was up there, you see it's been really consistent since we put that in place in the early 90s.
Yeah, thank you for that. And my last one is on the state tribal comment. So are the commercial guys talking, and I don't know what the process is for the negotiations, probably Cliffwick, it's probably Voight, I don't know, but are the commercial guys talking to the tribal guys? Have you talked to them, Craig, and do you know what their feelings are about letting one representative maybe in on them negotiations?
I've had some just brief conversation with them, but right now we have the state as our representation, and we've been told over and over again, but I don't see why we would not be welcomed in on this. There are tribal fishers that partake in this, and I think it's so crucial that we have a seat at the table, because all of these changes in these negotiations have such an effect on us. So I mean, I would be more than happy to reach out and see if the tribal members, I'm actually friends with the chair and the vice chair for the Red Cliff Band. I would love to have a conversation with them and see if they would invite one of us to come. I think it's a place to start.
The state has looked at the state tribal negotiations as a government to government negotiation, and it's not with Cliffwick, it's with Red Cliff Band and Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewas directly. And so there is not, historically we've said it's government to government and not allowing non-government employees to be part of that. As Craig mentioned, it is our goal as the state to represent them during the negotiations, and as well as keep them informed to get the commercial board's thoughts, but as well as the recreational side, as well as keeping in the NRB informed in that as we move forward. The last agreement negotiations took basically 4 years and culminated with rules in 2018. To the Natural Resources Board. So we're coming up on that expiration is in 2028. We're going to begin early, and the goal will be to keep everybody informed. But at my level, I can just say that it's a government to government negotiation. And we typically do not have the or representation from either the sport industry or the commercial industry.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Doug.
thanks, Brad, and I can appreciate that. I mean, that's the first thing you'll hear from leadership, certainly at those negotiations and at the table. But again, there's always relationships that can be fostered to help those negotiations, whether they're formally at the table or just communicating, off negotiation times. And I think Craig's concerns and his relationships he may have up there can always foster some input from those commercial guys that aren't necessarily in the government to government aspect. And I think the tribal guys would appreciate that as well.
Yep, and I would like to highlight that Craig has, as the chair, there is a Red Cliff tribal member on the Lake Superior Commercial Fishing Board. And so Craig has tried to encourage collaboration at that level too, so that there's communication with Red Cliff as well as the state, since there is a Red Cliff tribal member on the Commercial Fishing Board. So.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Thank you for a very informative annual briefing on Lake Michigan, Lake Superior. Good to see everybody here, and look forward to good fishing in the future.
Thank you all.
Okay, we'll move on to our next informational item. Item 6B, State Revolving Fund Program Updates. Jim Ritchie, Director, Bureau of Community Financial Assistance. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Smith, members of the board, Secretary Yun. My name is Jim Ritchie. I'm the Director of Community Financial Assistance. We are the program that administers many of the grant and loan programs at DNR. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you today and provide an update on the State Revolving Fund program. It's a very busy and meaningful time for us in this program with a significant influx in federal funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and I'm happy to share some information about that with you today. I'd also like to take a quick moment and acknowledge Board Member Robin Schmidt. As you may know, Robin was previously the leader of this program for several years until she retired, and so thank you, Robin, for leaving the program in great shape. Okay. I'd like to start just real quickly and give some background information, some explanation on what the State Revolving Fund, or SRF, program is. It's comprised of two main loan programs, the Clean Water Fund and the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. Both provide financial assistance to municipalities. The Clean Water Fund provides funding for wastewater infrastructure, things like wastewater treatment plants, sanitary sewers, and lift stations. It can also provide funding for stormwater and non-point source projects that benefit water quality, in addition to PFAS projects that are associated with wastewater. The Safe Drinking Water Loan Program, as the name implies, provides financial assistance to municipalities for drinking water infrastructure. Things like drinking water treatment facilities, water mains, municipal wells, and lead service line replacements. Things that are necessary for compliance with federal drinking water standards and the Safe Drinking Water Act. It also includes projects that improve PFAS or address PFAS in drinking water. A little overview of the SRF program structure. If you follow the flow chart kind of on the right, this is federal funding that's appropriated by Congress. The US EPA provides federal capitalization grants, annual grants, to the states like Wisconsin to administer the two state programs, the Clean Water Fund and the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. The state then, Wisconsin DNR, provides financial assistance to municipalities throughout the state, again, for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure work. The communities then, in turn, do the projects, and they return that funding, they repay that funding back to the state, and that's the revolving nature, the revolving component of the State Revolving Fund. That funding then goes back into the program and is available for future loans. The funding through the two loan programs is provided as low interest loans, reduced interest or subsidized interest rates. And they typically have a 20 or 30-year repayment term, not all that different than a mortgage that we're all familiar with. Portions of the loans may be provided as what we call principal forgiveness, or PF, to eligible applicants. Principal forgiveness is essentially a portion of that loan funding it's like a grant that does not have to be repaid. And then I'll point out that in Wisconsin, the State Revolving Fund program is jointly administered by DNR, a Community Financial Assistance, our program, as well as our colleagues at the Department of Administration Capital Finance are an integral part of this program. I'd like to provide a few high-level numbers just to provide some context for the history and really the size of this program. The program has been in existence for 35 years. The first loans in the program were issued in 1990 through the Clean Water Fund program. Since then, we've provided funding for over 2,000 projects and provided over $7.3 billion in financial assistance to communities around the state. So the program's been around for a very long time, and it's provided a lot of funding for many different projects. And the last bullet here, just to give a kind of a context of kind of where the program stands right now. Again, I mentioned the loans are repaid by the municipalities to the state. The funding is revolved back into the program. Communities make those repayments back to the state, to DOA, twice a year. And so in the most recent repayment cycle, which I believe was in May of this year, $238.8 million was repaid to the state. Just one of the two repayment cycles per year. So that's how the program is able to grow over time with the repayments. It's really a key component of the program. As I mentioned, the SRF program provides low interest, or what we call subsidized loans. So I just have a few numbers I want to share with you about the interest rates and the benefits that provides to communities who participate in the program. So the box at the top shows the current interest rate. Our colleagues at DOA, on a quarterly basis, they establish the interest rate. They call it the market rate based on current economic conditions. That market rate right now is 4.7%. Our program then provides what we call our standard subsidized rate, which is 55% of that market rate. So that's 2.585%. So that's the interest rate that most communities are able to get through our program. I'll also note that we also are able to offer even lower interest rates for communities that qualify as disadvantaged communities. And we have criteria spelled out in our annual intended use plan for communities that can qualify as disadvantaged for even lower rate. The box in the middle, I want to just give an example of an average project and what kind of benefits this has. So an average loan for us is about $3.8 million for a 20-year term. So that loan then is repaid over a 20-year period. If a community were to just use that market rate of 4.7%, you can see over 20 years, the interest that they would pay on that is about $2.1 million. Using our standard subsidized rate, though, of 2.5%, they would only be paying about $1.1 million of interest over that 20 years. So that's about $1 million of cost savings for a community for this size project. That's a significant benefit to the communities, and really it's to the ratepayers, the residents, the taxpayers in those communities who are repaying that. And that's for a $3.8 million project. We'll provide funding for projects that are significantly more expensive than that, and those savings just increase beyond that. And then at the bottom, to provide some context for this current fiscal year, state year 25, we've provided about $600 million in total loan funding. The corresponding interest rate savings for that $600 million for all of those projects over their life is about $160 million. So again, significant savings for all of the communities that participate in this program from the reduced interest rate. It's really a key component of the SRF program. That's kind of an explanation of the SRF program. And as I mentioned, we're receiving a significant influx of federal funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law. This was passed with bipartisan support in late 2021, and it's providing 5 years of additional funding from 2023 through 2027 via 5 additional capitalization grants to our program, each of the 5 years. So I mentioned initially we received 2 base capitalization grants for the Clean Water Fund and the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program annually. The bipartisan infrastructure law, or the bill, is providing these 5 additional capitalization grants each of those 5 years. And so just very quickly, items number 1 and number 3 are supplemental funding. That's just additional funding for our base clean water and safe drinking water programs. Numbers 2 and 4 are additional funding for emerging contaminants, so specific to PFAS and other emerging contaminants. And lastly, lead service line funding for our safe drinking water loan program, another really important effort in Wisconsin. So for each of the 5 bill years, we're receiving approximately $193.4 million in additional funding, and that adds up to over $900 million over the 5-year period. This chart just kind of reflects the loan funding demand, so the applications that we've received over the last 12 years or so, starting at the bottom, I believe that was in 2014 up through 2026. The blue on the bar charts is the Clean Water Fund. The green is the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program. What we're really showing is the top 3 lines, the last 3 years where we've really seen a spike in loan demand and in applications that we've received, largely due to the bipartisan infrastructure law funding and the additional principal forgiveness that's been available through it. In fact, the last 3 years, the demand has averaged over $900 million, slightly exceeding our available funding through the Clean Water Fund program. And we expect that demand to continue the next couple of years, the remaining years of the bill funding. And this graphic, we just wanted to show how the funding is being allocated around the state the last 3 years. The darker blue shows the higher dollar amounts that have been allocated. And as you might expect, those are largely around the population centers. But what we really want to show is that the funding is being allocated all across the state. In fact, in the last 3 years, only 8 counties have not had projects that have received funding. So we're really happy that the distribution is really statewide with this program. And then some figures on the left, just for this current year, 2025 funding, to show that we're funding both large and small communities and large and small projects. The largest project that we're funding this year is with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. They have a population of over 783,000 people. The smallest recipient is the Rockland Sanitary District number 1. That's in Manitowoc County with a population of just 182 people. The largest project that we funded this year is also with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District for an aeration basin upgrade, $81.1 million, a very large project. The smallest loan was to the new city of New Auburn, north of Eau Claire, for a sanitary sewer replacement at a loan of just over $72,000. So really trying to show the range of sizes and communities that our funding is utilized by. And then lastly, I just want to show 3 examples of projects to give you a kind of a feel for the types of projects that we're able to fund. This is with funding with the Burnett Sanitary District. This was a regionalization project. They had a small outdated leaking lagoon system that they use for treating their wastewater. They were unable to meet their phosphorus permit limits, and they were at risk of contaminating the nearby drinking water sources with E. coli. Facility was only about a mile from the Horicon Marsh. The sanitary district and their engineers looked at a number of options for upgrades at the facility, and in the end, the decision was to, in fact, connect their wastewater to the city of Beaver Dam and their wastewater treatment plant that they found was the most effective long-term solution. So the Burnett Sanitary District population of only 300, and this project cost about $6.5 million. So you can imagine that would be a real hardship for a small sanitary district like that. They were able to receive $3.1 million from our program in principal forgiveness and $1.3 million in low-interest loans. They also received some funding from a federal agency, a partner, the USDA Rural Development. We're sometimes able to co-fund some projects like this. Next, the city of South Milwaukee and their lead service line replacement efforts. They have a population of 20,526. Like many communities, they tackle their lead service line replacement efforts over a couple of years. In fact, South Milwaukee is doing it over 3 years. They, over the first 2 years, have received about $2.5 million in principal forgiveness and $1.9 million in low-interest funding. The city has plans in 2026. Our loan awards haven't been announced just yet. They're coming soon, but they have plans to replace their remaining lead service lines in 2026. This summer, they celebrated their removal of their 1,000th lead service line, which was a really great milestone. And lastly, I just want to show the city of West Bend in Washington County. They have a drinking water project to treat PFAS. They had PFAS show up in 3 of their city wells. And so they received funding to install a granular activated carbon or GAC treatment system to treat the water from all 3 of those wells. West Bend has a population of 32,150. Total project cost was $7.6 million. $3.5 million was provided in principal forgiveness and $4.1 million in loan funding. So again, just some example projects to show the types of things that we're able to fund and the benefit to those communities. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jim. Are there questions from the board? Doug, go ahead.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jim. So are both programs available for tribal lands application?
Good question. Tribes are eligible. However, they also can receive a direct allocation from US EPA. Same program, but instead of coming through DNR, it goes directly to the tribes, and that's been the more common. We have had a couple of projects funded through tribes, but mostly they go through the direct allocation.
That makes sense. I would assume if they come through the state, then probably, my opinion anyway, they'd qualify for disadvantaged community funding as well,
Correct.
interest rates.
Correct.
Right. Thanks.
Robin, I thought you might have a question about this. Only one?
I'm going to be very limited. Thank you, Jim. Excellent presentation. And really amazing work that you and your staff are doing. Could you talk just briefly about something that we had started a while ago, but it kind of took a while to build, and that's the concept of the pilot projects for kind of more green infrastructure and kind of how creative the program can be to meet other needs other than just brick and mortar treatment plants?
Happy to. Yeah, thanks, Robin. The pilot projects program is a component of the Clean Water Fund program specifically. And it's in our administrative code. We're able to fund projects that don't typically fit real well into the standard Clean Water Fund project. So it gives us a little bit of flexibility. We're able to fund projects even at a 0% interest rate through the pilot project program. So primarily it's been used to this point for water quality pollutant trading. So when a wastewater treatment plant has permit limits and they're able to work with agricultural producers in their vicinity to help meet phosphorus reduction requirements in particular, we're able to provide some funding through the pilot program to help offset those costs for that water quality trading, essentially. We've also been able to expand it just this year on a really neat project with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District for their green infrastructure program. They have a really robust green infrastructure program to install things like rain gardens, bioswales, green roofs. And they approached us a number of years ago, as you're referring to try and provide some funding for their efforts. They needed some additional funding because they're funding hundreds of projects like that throughout the Milwaukee metropolitan area. So it took a little while to figure out how we would make that fit into our normal loan agreement or into our program, and we determined eventually the pilot program was the way to go. So Dave Calhoun, our longtime project manager, did some great work on this, working with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. EPA even took a strong interest in this. They've encouraged states to try and find flexibility in funding non-point source projects. So they even provided some technical assistance. And so it took some time, but we were able to work out a loan agreement for Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. Is about $28 million. Finally closed on that this spring, I think in March. And hopefully that'll be the first of others that will follow that example. Thanks.
Jim, I recall a board meeting in Milwaukee a couple of years ago. We were out on tour and got a look at some of that green infrastructure work going on as a way to manage the stormwater flows that were giving Milwaukee Met all kinds of problems in terms of handling capacity during storm events. And they had rebuilt streams, tearing out concrete. Basically, it was a concrete ditch, completely tore it out. Revegetated it and created a more natural stream corridor that at the same time had a capacity to handle and slow down a lot of that stormwater runoff. I thought it was just extremely interesting, and they were very complimentary of the program and the assistance it gave them in Milwaukee to handle those kind of wastewater flows.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Yeah, they've been our biggest customer for many years. They have a lot of really big projects. You can imagine those types of projects that are very different than a wastewater treatment plant where it's just at one facility, or even a sanitary sewer that's in a defined spot. These are, in dozens or hundreds of projects, smaller ones that are all around. And so it just took a little bit of effort to figure out how to make it fit for funding, but glad we got there.
Thank you. Other questions?
Can I just ask one other question? So with respect to the lead service line replacement program, can you give us some idea? And I think this has happened since I have left. Do you know how many lead service lines are out there and the timeline for eliminating all of those connections?
Yeah, municipalities in Wisconsin have to report annually to the Public Service Commission. They have to do inventories and then report how many lead service lines they are. So I don't have the exact numbers, but it's been around 200,000 in Wisconsin. Our colleagues in the drinking water program would know that offhand. But you're right, the federal lead and copper rule is in effect. It gives communities now until 2037, so just over 10 years, to replace all lead service lines in the state, all remaining ones. So communities have been working very hard the last several years in updating their inventories and then working on replacing those lead service lines, but it's going to be a significant effort. The funding that we have through the bill will not be sufficient. We estimated it'll be about 40 to 50% of the need in the state. So our regular safe drinking water program will still be there, but I know there's been budget initiatives to try and include some state funding. So we'll see where that goes once the bill funding is done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Jim. That's it for
Could
me.
I just make a note that I think Jim was one of my best hires? You can pay me later, Jim.
Okay, we'll move on to item 7, Department Secretaries Matters.
Great.
Karen.
The first is the real estate transactions. Are there any questions on the real estate transactions? Okay, and then I'll move on to 7B. Just thank you guys again for engaging in all the material and for your guidance as we move forward on our policy work here. I'll just give a shout out to Jim Ritchie and that team. When I get to go to these ECOS meetings across the board, there is broad support from every state in the nation for this type of work and this type of funding and partnership with the EPA. It's particularly helpful, as Jim was mentioning, in rural areas. And so there's a lot of places where, you know, it doesn't matter which state, where they really depend on this kind of funding, which is appropriated through the appropriations process for these types of projects, because it is so successful no matter where you are in the country. So just a really great success story, lots of work to go, but really a great program and a great success for us here in Wisconsin too. And I'll turn it back to you, Bill.
Okay. Board Members Matters. Doug Cox, you're first.
Oh, yeah, I get to go first. All right, thanks, Chair. So just a couple of things. Again, thanks to staff here. You know, it's amazing to see all the work we're getting done in the state and the great work they do. It's just a plus to be able to see that stuff. The other one's impacts from federal shutdown was going to be a question I had. I heard the Secretary talk about that in the beginning. You know, we're assessing that. It would be good to know as a board member, nothing lengthy, if there's just things that stand out. I mean, we heard concerns, you know, in the public comments about threatened and endangered species. Obviously, those are federal responsibilities, but are we really seeing those, you know, as impacts from federal shutdown? If we're quantifying those and know those are happening, it would be good to know those are happening. So those kinds of things on federal shutdown impacts would be, I for one would like to see some of that. Thanks, Madam Secretary, for your consultation, participation with the 11 tribes. I haven't heard feedback personally back other than our own tribe, and you know, it's positive, so we appreciate that. The other thing is on the wake boats, you know, I mean, what a tussle it always is. And, you know, we've heard James come with a lot of information and a lot of suggestions and a lot of frustration. You know, and he always says, you know, let me sit down with staff to try to work some of these things out. Is that impossible? I mean, is it possible to do? You know, is it happening? Do we have technical groups that we could get him in on and have some of them discussions, accommodating some of the great knowledge and information he has? You know, why not if we're not? So that are the kind of things that I was thinking about.
Can I respond to that? Just last comment there. I just wanted to let you guys all know that I think I mentioned maybe 2 meetings ago that we were setting up a sort of internal team to review some of the studies that are coming out, both of University of Minnesota and just across the board. They've met twice now, and it includes, it's cross-cutting across the department. So not just PSRP, but, you know, our environmental management staff, our fisheries staff, our communications and legal. So it's, you know, it's a big deal. So we have to like make sure all of the parts of the agency are weighing in. They've met a couple times now and wanted me to relay a couple things to you all, since I know this has been an issue, a standing issue in front of the board. But one is that they are evaluating not just the studies, but stuff coming out of individuals and nonprofits and lake associations and the tribes, which we're hearing from now too on this issue, across more than 40 lakes in Wisconsin. They're taking a look at the research conducted on the impact of jet skis too, that when they were first introduced raised similar concerns. So looking at sort of the scientific studies and the evaluations of regulations on that as something to compare to the situation we're in now. Obviously that is opening up a, you know, just a general discussion around boating in general, the impacts of boating. So it's taking some time to evaluate all of the recommendations they'll make to me. And then also, obviously, we're tracking the legislative process. So there have been bills introduced in several sessions here. So we're sort of keeping track of that and getting prepared for if something should be moving forward. So a lot of work underway here to try to evaluate what our options are. So I didn't want you to think that we were not taking it seriously and just trying to look, but it's complicated and hard and tough. So it's taking some time.
Appreciate it, and I agree. Thanks, Chair, that's all I had.
Thank you, Doug. Karen, along those lines, is there any kind of a timeline with the development of this team on when they might have a progress report or some kind of a public report? We're just getting an awful lot of pressure from the public on this issue. There's a lot of interest. They want to find out what's going on. They want a sense that somebody's interested in working on it. And this would be a great opportunity to highlight that team. Any kind of a sense of timeline when something like that might be possible?
Yeah, I'm hoping that they will be able to make some recommendations to me soon, but I'm not sure exactly. I think the amount of material continues to grow. But I was very interested to hear at least maybe the last board meeting and some of the stakeholders that spoke to us about their legislative proposals moving forward based on the University of Minnesota study. I continue to believe that, if we're going to solve this problem on the landscape, we're going to have to work with the legislature on an approach that gives us additional authority and resources to solve it.
I just believe after listening to this for several years now, I believe there's middle ground in this. If people would just focus on looking for solutions that work rather than staking out positions and fighting over it. Clearly, there are state waters that are deep enough and large enough to allow wake surfing without significant impact. On the other side of it, there are a whole bunch of lakes now that are shallow and sensitive that are suffering the consequences of wake surfing. And as we heard from Jim earlier today, the incidence of infestations of invasives, just one aspect of wake surfing is accelerating rapidly in the states adjacent to us. And it just gives people a sense of urgency on it. So I applaud you for pulling this team together. Look forward to hearing from them.
Sounds great.
Okay, Deb Dassow.
Wake boats, working off of Doug and Karen, I had two different people, Jeff Musin, who a lot of you know, contacted me this week. He's trying to work on lake association issues up in the north where he is. What he said to me though in the conversation that was a little unsettling is that he was told flat out by his senator that there will be no legislation coming out on wake. So there's that. All the information on the fisheries today makes me really want to have a really good fish sandwich after this meeting. That was fascinating. And I also think that a lot of the comments that people have made, and I kind of feel like this institution is on an island that still respects, historical knowledge, that still respects experts, still respects science. And when we get outside of this organization, I feel that that's coming crashing down on us, and that makes me very, very afraid. I had a joyful experience. I was invited to the Milwaukee Riverkeeper first ever fundraiser celebrating their 30 years of work in Milwaukee. If you know the Milwaukee area, you have three major rivers that converge in downtown Milwaukee: the Menominee, the Kinnickinnick, and then the Milwaukee River, and then they flow into Lake Michigan. And they were talking about, they have so many, 4,500 volunteers come out at once to clean up some of these waters. So a lot of the things that all of you have experienced in your communities, it's so cool to see that we have so many people out there that really care about what this particular institution cares about. So, and the other thing is AI, STEAM, if we look at some of the other states that have multiple AI, it's going to be a problem here. And I don't know, I don't know what to do about it personally, but I see that in the county in which I live. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Deb. Jeff?
Well, that was an educational morning for me. The Great Lakes issues were, you guys did a very nice job. I appreciate hearing about that. It just gives you a wide, you just did what I'm getting into here, you know, with all the different issues. It's pretty comprehensive, and that was a great presentation. So I did learn a lot. That was very appreciative of those talks. In fact, I met with Marcy West, who was a former NRB member here. Last week, we met with a group of individuals in the western area, the Vernon County area, to try to figure out how we can pick up the pace for deer donations, things like that. And it's always the old saying, two heads are better than one kind of a thing. You know, you get more ideas and things like that. So we're going to try to do a couple things, be innovative. We're also working with Kim Zolke with the Cooley National Deer Association. Kim's got a lot of great ideas, and we're going to try and copy some of those and try to come up with some of our own too. I was part of the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation alternative funding meeting a couple weeks ago, looking at both short-term and long-term solutions for alternative funding. It's not going to be a quick thing, you know, a lot of ideas, but we've got a lot of examples from other states, you know, that have made it work, and so there's a group of nonprofits that are meeting on a regular basis, and I'll be part of that to look at alternative funding, both short-term and long. So that group is strong, and I think we're going to see some progress, but it's not going to be overnight. So, good
Okay,
meeting.
thank you. Patty, are you still with us?
I sure am.
Wonderful.
Very informative. The Great Lakes conversations was really, really fantastic. A couple things that I've been worried about and really think we need to follow is, first of all, the wake boat thing keeps going on. I'm glad Secretary Hohn has reported that there is a working group, so that's really exciting. I am a little worried with all the federal stuff that's going on, really how the donations of venison to the food shelves is going to look. You know, everyone's talking about the food pantries being short come November 1st, and I think more and more people are going to be thinking about hunting for themselves versus hunting to fill the pantry. So I think we need to keep an eye on that and watch for food scarcity, because it's a lot of people's main source of protein as we move into the winter. And that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Patty, and thanks much for joining us virtually and hanging in there.
Thank you.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all the staff who presented today. Really, again, another wonderfully informative set of discussions. So on my list here are a couple of things. I really appreciate the update on the Wake Boat work group. I think it's really important to show that the department is working on this internally. So it's, even if we don't have specific recommendations at any given point in time, it'd be just nice to know kind of periodic updates on how that's going. I also am really concerned about the impacts of not only the shutdown of the federal government, but also reduced funding for various programs. And so at some point, when it's appropriate, it would be really nice to just see how many department programs rely on federal funding, how many staff are supported by that, and the value to the communities and to our public, and you know, how do we kind of fill in those gaps? And I think, you know, it might be too soon to really know some of that right now, but I think it's important to understand how our state is benefited by many of these federal programs, and to really acknowledge the impact if those are cut or eliminated. You know, what does that mean for our state? without making it political, but just like data driven. I also want to really commend those organizations who continue to make significant donations to our natural resources. And I really want to also commend those who had the vision a while ago to create that Lower Wisconsin State Riverway. It's unbelievable how successful that's been. It's a great example of, you know, protecting that resource, and it continues to grow in terms of the benefits that the public receives from that. So kudos to those who had that vision and the tenacity to make that happen. And lastly, kind of feeding off of what Deb said, you know, every other day we're seeing new articles about the impacts of AI, not just from an environmental perspective, but from a whole, you know, power rates, utility rates, you know, sociological impacts, things like that. It would be great. I know we saw the things that were going on at the Microsoft Data Center, and I think there were some great things that they're trying to do to minimize some of the environmental impacts. But it would be great if we could, you know, continue to learn more about the impacts of AI and data centers. So I think, you know, I'm not sure it's all environmental regulations that are going to be coming into play. I think there's other things like the role of the PSC and others on that, but it does have huge impacts to us from a natural resources and the societal perspective. So when it's appropriate, it would be nice to hear more about that. And safe hunting, everyone. Enjoy the fall. I think it's coming finally.
Thanks, Robin. Most of my points of emphasis have been covered by everybody, or I've already shot my mouth off, so I won't double down on them. I did have one contact that I would like to use just to emphasize a subject that had come up in the past. I had a call from a fellow who was very concerned about chloride applications on our roads. But this was calcium chloride, and it was a summer application in his local community. So I referred it over to Robin because I knew Robin was working on the road salt and the icing issues in the winter and the implications of that. And hopefully we'll be able to do an informational briefing on that coming up soon, prior to the onset of winter here, although today feels like we're getting closer. And again, I want to extend my best wishes to everybody for a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday and our traditional hunting seasons, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody in December. We're here in Madison on December 10th for our next scheduled for meeting of the Natural Resources Board. So with that, we probably need a motion to adjourn here before we can make this official.
Move adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn from Robin. Is there a second? Jeff seconds. Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank
We have a
you.
meeting with Dice.